I cheated, got pregnant, unsure of the father. Husband filed for divorce and left. Are the girls ready yet? I asked my ex-wife rudely as I stood at her door, which used to be our door, to pick up my 13 and 12-year-old daughters for the weekend. Almost. How are you, Sam? Pauline asked, sounding almost genuinely concerned. I only get 2 days off a month. Make sure they're ready on time, I growled, ignoring her question. I'm trying, Sam, but you know how it is with them. Can you give them a few extra minutes? So are you doing okay? I'll wait in the car, I snapped, turning around and heading back to my car. Sam, I heard her say as I walked away. I didn't turn around. This was a familiar scene, her trying to ease her conscience and me ignoring her. About 5 minutes later, Karen, 13, and Wendy, 12, came out with a small bag. They jumped into my car with a chorus of "Sorry, Daddy," and my anger faded. Pauline was right. Getting girls that age ready was like herding cats, and I couldn't stay mad since I only had them for a couple of days. I tried to make those days special, avoiding everyday hassles. After catching me up on the last couple of weeks, I was ready to tell them the big news. They had been asking for a new Nintendo, and I could finally afford it. I was excited to share this with them, but when I did, I was disappointed by their reaction. Oh, it's okay, Daddy, Karen said. Daddy Dave already bought us a new toy and a bunch of games. My disappointment turned to outrage. Daddy Dave? Goddamn Daddy Dave. If I felt on edge before, I was teetering now. Let me clarify. Dave had been my best friend since high school. He was a regular guy, more successful in business than in love. He wasn't into gambling or womanizing. He simply hadn't found the right woman. My kids called him Uncle Dave, and we trusted him like family. Pauline's closest friend was Aunt Daphne. Our marriage seemed solid. We still spent plenty of time together. Then, one Friday, Pauline dropped a bombshell. The kids were staying elsewhere for the weekend. I assumed she had planned a romantic getaway for us, but no. She revealed that she and Dave had fallen in love, and I received divorce papers the next day. She claimed they hadn't consummated their relationship, something I doubted and didn't care about. She spent that night with Dave and asked me to leave. I refused. I was unaware of a court order evicting me from the house. There were no misuse allegations, just a judge granting her temporary custody in the house, forcing me out. I didn't contest the divorce but made extreme demands, full custody and 75% of her income in alimony. Eventually, I grew weary of the battle and relented. I didn't pay child support due to our similar incomes, but it strained my finances. I lived frugally to afford things like a video game system for my daughters. Despite Pauline's attempts at civility, I harbored resentment. She got everything, a wealthy new husband, while I struggled with minimal time with the kids. With Dave's higher income and my alimony, they lived comfortably while I barely made ends meet. 2 months post-divorce, Pauline and Dave tied the knot. The biggest challenge was how the kids would react. I anticipated pushback or defiance, but they embraced it. Dave had been a fixture in their lives, so his presence wasn't confusing. They were pleased with 2 households. Since their wedding, I communicated only about the kids, offering no pleasantries. Now my children referred to Dave as Daddy. I tried to brush it off during the weekend, but as I dropped them off, I simmered with anger. After kissing them goodbye, they dashed inside, likely eager to try the new games Pauline had prepared. I need to talk to you, I said, and Pauline's reaction showed she sensed my threatening tone. I turned and walked away from the house, and she followed. What's wrong, Sam? Explain this Daddy Dave crap. They have one dad, me, so what's that about? The girls wanted to call him something other than Uncle Dave since we got married. Calling him Uncle felt awkward. We tried just Dave, but that seemed weird, so we settled on Daddy Dave. And who suggested that? I did, but the girls liked it and agreed right away. I told them you might not like it, but they thought you could handle it. Please don't make this a bigger deal. It's not for you to decide how it should be. Hearing them call someone else Daddy, especially that idiot, is painful. He didn't steal your family. And about the video games, we just thought they'd waited long enough and weren't sure when you could do it. We wanted the girls to have them. Yeah, and show me up in the process, huh? Sure, let's show how great Daddy Dave is and what a loser their real dad is. You left me, married a rich guy, and now have all this money while I struggle. But you can buy them anything they want. It's not like that. It is exactly like that. God, you cow. I turned, walked back to the car, and sped away without looking back. I was so angry, the thought of a life sentence for destroying Daddy Dave wasn't on my bucket list. This went on for years. Pauline and Dave expected my anger to soften, but it didn't. They tried to talk to me about my life and hoped I'd move on, but I ignored anything not related to my girls. I hadn't had any serious relationships since the divorce. Money was tight. I distrusted women, and I was still furious. I stuck to one-night stands with no long-term prospects. Bitter, angry, and poor doesn't attract women. Counseling never crossed my mind. The last straw was the first weekend of June. School had just ended, and I was looking forward to a summer weekend with my girls. Karen, now 15, was mature and responsible, and Wendy was 14. I still cherished every moment with them. "Are the girls ready yet?" I asked, as Pauline opened the door, repeating the same exchange we'd had for years. "They're not here, Sam," Pauline said, looking confused. "What do you mean they're not here?" I almost exploded. "They went to the beach with Finley for a week." "They sent you a letter a week ago." "Yes, and I replied that it was my weekend and I'd be there to pick them up." "Did you let them go?" "Of course, it's not my place to stop them." "Why miss the opportunity to screw things up more?" "Tell them I'll be here to talk when they get back," I said, walking away again. That week went by in a blur. I was angry, hurt, and frustrated. I only got 4 days a month with my daughters, and I didn't want to lose any of that time. If only I had known. I returned the following Friday night to talk about them going out of town against my wishes. Since the divorce, I had only stopped by the house a few times, always at the girls' request. This time I stepped into the living room with Pauline and Dave watching from the kitchen. The girls were waiting for me, and I struggled to keep my composure. "Mom said you wanted to talk about our trip with Finley this week," Karen began. "We sent you a letter." I emailed back that it was my weekend, and I expected you to be here. "Dad, we wanted to go." I didn't ask for permission. "What?" I nearly screamed. "You're not even 16, you need your parents' approval." I got Mom's permission. She said we could go if I coordinated with you. "And you thought a letter was enough?" "Dad, I'm 15. We're not little kids anymore. We want to do things with our friends. I thought you'd understand." "Are you saying you'd rather be with your friends than with me?" "Dad, we're growing up and want to spend time with friends. I can't plan my life around your custody schedule. We have plans almost every weekend, pool parties, trips to the beach. We're hardly home." It hit me that my daughters preferred their friends over spending time with me. It was like a knife to my heart. My anger turned to sadness, realizing this part of my life was over. I tried to hide my pain. "Okay, so you want to give up weekend visits?" I thought I heard Pauline sigh, but the girls didn't react. "We're just really busy, Dad. That doesn't mean we don't love you." 4 days a month, and they couldn't even manage that. The rest of the time, they had Mom and Daddy Dave. There was no room for me anymore. I didn't expect my fatherhood to end when the girls became teenagers, but it did. "Sure, girls. We'll get the visits over with. Have fun." They hugged me and thanked me, then ran to their rooms. They had no idea what they'd done to me. My place in their lives was gone. I stood up and headed for the door. Pauline approached me. "Are you okay, Sam?" I tried to pull myself together, but I'm sure I failed. "Yeah, it's fine. I have opportunities I've been putting off. A buddy in North Carolina has been trying to get me out there for years." I headed for the exit, and Pauline quickly realized my words. "Wait, Sam, you didn't say you were moving to North Carolina, did you?" "Yes, why not? They haven't needed me for years, thanks to you. Now they don't need me at all. This is the end result of what you set in motion, Pauline. There's nothing here for me anymore. You and Dave are their parents now. I'm out. Congratulations, you win." Tears filled my eyes. I needed to leave before I broke down. I quickly walked out and got into my car. It took me a moment to get the key into the lock. Maybe it was the tears that made it difficult. "Sam, wait," Dave called out, placing a hand on my shoulder. I didn't respond. I just turned and punched him in the jaw, knocking him down but not out. Pauline rushed to him while I fumbled with my keys. "Sam, don't do this. They're just at that age. They still love and need you, even if they don't realize it now. Leaving will devastate them." "What do you want me to do, Paulie? Sit in my crappy one-bedroom apartment hoping they'll make time for me or be their backup plan if there's nothing else to do?" "It won't be like that, Sam." "Of course it will. You heard them. All I looked forward to was their visits. Now that's gone."
"And you're breaking their hearts."
"I doubt it, but at least I won't be the only one heartbroken anymore." They were relieved they didn't have to visit me. Or honestly, they won't even notice I'm gone, at least for a while.
"Sam, please don't do this. I never wanted this."
"Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't matter. Maybe I'll see you again someday." I finally unlocked the car door. Dave got to his feet, both of them looking mournful. I got into the car and paused before closing the door. "Take care of my girls." They nodded slightly as I drove away. I hoped they wouldn't tell the girls. I didn't want them visiting out of pity or obligation. It was time to go our separate ways. Breaking up a family is like losing cherished dreams. Pauline and I envisioned growing old together with visits from children and grandchildren. The end of my marriage shattered those dreams. I still hoped for future milestones like graduations and weddings, but they now felt distant. Maybe someday I'd reunite with the girls, but it felt like the end. I called my friend Tim, who offered me a job. The pay was better, and I'd continue paying child support, even though they didn't need it. I wanted to fulfill my obligations without the pain of being physically distant. I had my apartment lease terminated, packed my car, and drove to Durham. Tim set me up in his home services business, where I did repairs and pest control. Nights were tough, and I turned to drinking to cope. Tim's parties became a distraction, but my sadness lingered, especially since I hadn't heard from my daughters in weeks. My booze consumption increased, often leaving me intoxicated. I didn't form emotional connections with the women I met. At these parties, I was merely seeking familiarity. The routine persisted: drink, find a partner, pass out, and they'd leave by morning. Tim would provide breakfast, and I'd return home feeling miserable. Over time, I began forgetting my partner's names. The woman from Labor Day was unmemorable, and on Halloween, I couldn't even recognize her costume. Tim hosted a Veterans Day party shortly after Halloween, which everyone enjoyed. Thanksgiving approached, but without my daughters, and I drank heavily. Before Thanksgiving, I finally heard from my girls, but it wasn't the reunion I anticipated. Karen called to suggest skipping our visit to go shopping with Finley. Still unaware of my relocation, I didn't mention it and wished them a good time. Thanksgiving was lonely. I drank alone in my hotel room. Though Tim invited me over, I couldn't bear being around non-family. The next morning, I found several missed calls and texts, including a cheerful Thanksgiving message from my daughters and a voicemail from Pauline, which I reluctantly listened to. "Sam, it's Pauline. I know we haven't talked because I assumed that's what you wanted, but the holidays can be hard, so I wanted to check on you. The girls called you, but they don't realize you've moved. Please remember they're still kids and very busy. They love you very much. I know you don't want to talk to me, but please let me know you're okay. An email or text is fine. I'm sorry for how things turned out. Please let me know you're okay." I deleted all messages and emails, then quickly texted Pauline to let her know I was alive, though not okay. I didn't want to, but it was easier than ignoring her. Feeling down, I grabbed another beer. For weeks, I was either working, drinking, or passed out. As Christmas and New Year's approached, I felt even more depressed, knowing I'd celebrate without my girls for the first time. Finally, I got the call I'd been dreading. My daughters called about Christmas plans. We alternated holidays since the divorce, and this year I had Christmas Eve. They left a message to confirm. I took a couple of days to gather myself before calling back, but then Pauline called and left a voicemail, clearly annoyed. "Sam, it's Pauline. I hope you missed the girls' message and didn't ignore it. I told them you moved, and they're hurt. They always thought they could see you whenever, and now they know that's not the case. I hope you're proud of hurting them. I don't trust you with them right now. You seem intent on punishing them for my actions. I was going to suggest they fly to you, but I'm not comfortable with that anymore. Please think about what you're doing. Don't ruin your relationship with them because you're mad at me. Call me if you want to talk. Merry Christmas, Sam." "Goddamn cow," I muttered to myself. I had a few more beers and called her back. "Sam, you goddamn cow," I slurred. "Who do you think you are? You can't threaten me about seeing my kids when I can't see them anyway." "Sam, are you drunk?" "Yeah, pretty much." "You shouldn't drink so much, Sam. It's bad for you." "What's it to you? You've taken everything I lived for. What do you care?" "Do I care about you, Sam?" "Yeah, you showed how much you cared by cheating on me and leaving me. You let the kids leave me too." "I didn't do that, Pauline. You sent them away on my weekend so they'd never see me." "You're a lying, manipulative, cheating strumpet." She took a deep breath. "Sam, I know you're drunk and angry. Let's talk when you've had less to drink. Who are you to judge me? You're the cheater. I'm hanging up with my best friend, kicking me out, draining me, then judging me." "You've got a nerve, Pauline." "Pauline?" She hung up. Damn cow. I spent Christmas alone, mostly lying in bed. I watched sports on TV, but every reminder of Christmas made me more depressed, leading to more drinking. I woke up during the Lakers game, either asleep or passed out, smiled as they lost by 20 points, and passed out again. Working for Tim's service company, we didn't get much time off. We had a contract to repair a house destroyed by its owners after foreclosure. Several of us, including plumbers and electricians, worked together. I helped with drywall, and it was a fun couple of days. These guys were funny and friendly, unlike the aloofness I'd felt from others before. Maybe it was because Tim and I were friends before I started working there, but these guys made me feel welcome. Around mid-morning, I saw Tim's truck pull up. He got out with another guy I recognized but couldn't name. They entered the house, greeted the crew, and headed toward me. "Hey Sam, can I talk to you for a minute?" Sure, Tim. I always have time for the guy who signs my checks. The crew laughed, but Tim only smiled faintly. Let's go outside, Tim said, leading the way. The other guy stepped aside to give us privacy. How's it going, Sam? As good as could be expected, I replied, curious about the direction of this conversation. Have you had anything to drink today? No, Tim, of course not. Great, blow into this, he said, pulling out a breathalyzer. I eyed it warily. What's that for? Just need to be sure. I glanced back at my CO workers who quickly looked away. It was clear someone had reported me. Hesitantly, I admitted, I might have had a beer this morning. That's not too bad, he said, still holding out the breathalyzer. Realizing I had no choice, I blew into it. Tim checked the reading and his smile vanished. You failed, 0.04. That's more than just a beer this morning. Yeah, but I'm not legally drunk. That's for driving. On a construction site, if OSHA checks and finds you under the influence, it's a problem for me and a liability if someone gets hurt. Tim, I'm fine. What you do at home is your business, but here it affects us all. I want your keys. One perk of the job was using company cars. I handed over the keys. You're done for the day. Oscar will take you home and cover for you tomorrow. Come to my office and we'll talk. I stood there, humiliated and growing angry. You know what, Tim? I said, shoving my helmet at him. Screw you, I don't need this. I walked to the truck and waited for Oscar to take me home. We drove in silence except for my mumbled directions. When we arrived, I thanked him and slammed the door. Holy crap, I fumed. One of those idiots must have called Tim, screw them. I opened the fridge and grabbed a beer. Perfect, I thought. No work tomorrow. I woke up in a hospital room, unsure how I got there. A nurse entered. Good, you're awake. What's wrong? I asked. The doctor will be here soon. She checked my vitals and left. A few minutes later, a young, attractive Hispanic female doctor entered, reviewing my chart. Good afternoon, Mr. Beckman. How are you feeling? I didn't answer right away, trying to process how the beautiful woman in front of me was named Anderson. Mr. Beckman? I'm sorry, based on your last name, I expected an older white guy, not a young, pretty woman. Thank you. My husband is a white guy, hence the name. So, how are you feeling? Really tired and kind of unimportant. What's wrong with me? You've consumed a large amount of alcohol over a long time, leading to alcohol poisoning and severe dehydration. If your friend hadn't called an ambulance, you might not have survived. A friend? She glanced at her papers. Tim Banks called the ambulance. Sure. Mr. Banks asked me to notify him when you're awake. Is that okay? I reluctantly nodded. Yeah, it's okay. You'll stay here for observation for a couple of days as your body detoxifies. Complications might require immediate intervention. Any questions? No, I don't think so. After giving instructions to rest, Dr. Anderson left. I turned on the TV for background noise and tried to relax. I felt fine, doubting I'd need a couple of days, but who was I to argue with a pretty doctor? About an hour later, there was a knock on the door and it opened slightly. I heard a man's voice. Are you dressed, Sam? Yes. Tim entered with his usual calm manner and stopped a few feet from the bed. How's it going? I'm going to live. I haven't decided if that's good or bad yet, I said with a half smile. I suppose a thank you wouldn't hurt. You don't have to, Sam. You can thank me by getting well and getting back to work. I didn't think I still had a job. You think you're the first employee to tell me to back off? We've been friends for a long time, and I'm doing everything I can to help you through this. I don't agree with all your decisions, but my advice is to get off your back, get your crap together, and rebuild your relationship with your kids. Don't let what? Pauline did ruin your life. I acknowledged he was correct. I was only injuring myself, perhaps the girls too. It was time to get my act together. Tim and I talked a while longer before he departed. Later that evening, I felt worse. The doctor attributed it to my body adjusting to sobriety. After about 24 hours without alcohol, I realized how dismal that sounded. Despite surviving the night, I checked out of the hospital the next day with referrals for counseling, psychiatry, rehab, and AA. Though I felt I had hit rock bottom and didn't need them, Tim's encouragement and my hospital stay were sufficient to set me on the right path. I took a few weeks off work, which I could afford, and returned feeling optimistic. The subsequent months were uneventful. I enjoyed Tim's Martin Luther King Jr. Day party without drinking, hesitant to test if I was an alcoholic. I intended to resume drinking eventually, but stuck to non-alcoholic beverages for the time being. The monthly gatherings grew dull. They initially offered socializing opportunities, but I found drunken, anonymous revelry unfulfilling. Thus, I skipped the Valentine's Day party and opted for a hearty steak dinner instead. On March 1st, my life took a turn. While out running errands one Saturday, I witnessed a woman with dark blonde curls stumble and injure her ankle on the sidewalk. Though others nearby ignored her, I hurried over to assist. "Are you okay?" I asked, knowing it was a silly question. Tears formed in her pale blue eyes as she looked up. "I think I sprained my ankle. We need to get you to the trauma center. I can call an ambulance or I can drive you myself if you prefer." "I don't want to impose." "It's no imposition, you just made my day more interesting." "I'm Sam, by the way." "Okay, if you're sure. Nice to meet you, Sam. I'm Hall." I helped her up and noticed she was pregnant. "Oh yes, about 4 months," she confirmed. "Then let's hurry." I picked her up, carried her to my truck, and drove to the emergency room. Inside, I got a wheelchair for Holly and helped her into it. She was taken straight to a room, and I waited in the lobby for 4 hours, playing games and browsing the web on my phone. I expected she would call her husband and I could leave, but no one came. Eventually, Holly came out in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse in light blue scrubs. Holly was talking about getting a cab, but the nurse seemed to know I was waiting. When Holly saw me, she smiled brightly. The nurse nudged her towards me, and I helped her into my truck. I thanked the nurse, even though she had already turned away, and then got into the driver's seat. "I didn't expect you to still be here." "I was waiting for your husband, but when no one came, I stayed." "I don't have a husband. It's just me and my mom, and she's out of town." "Did you call her?" "She'd just worry and rush back." "I'll be fine. Since you've been waiting so long, could you give me a ride to my car?" I looked at her bandaged ankle. "Holly, I don't think you can drive with that ankle." "Oh, Sam, I didn't even think of that." "Let me take you to my house and we'll figure out how to get your car." "That's very generous, Sam, but I've already taken up a lot of your time." "I enjoy it. It's more interesting than sitting at home watching TV. I'd be happy to keep helping if you don't mind." "Thanks, Sam." She gave me directions to her house. I carried Holly from the truck into her home. As I headed toward the couch, she stopped me. "Sam, I really need the restroom. Do you mind?" I followed her directions and placed her in front of the restroom, waiting nearby. I ordered an Uber while I waited. She called out and I found her up and dressed. I carried her to the couch. "What now?" she asked. "I need to pick up your car." "It's illegal to park there overnight." "How are you going to do that?" "I ordered an Uber to get it." "Can I borrow your keys?" "You've done so much for me, but I appreciate it." She handed me the keys, giving me the license plate number and parking spot. As I waited for my ride, I stopped at the doorstep. "Holly, will you have dinner with me tonight?" "I'd love to, Sam," she smiled, "but I can't go anywhere. I'll grab something while picking up your car, and we'll eat here." I was about to leave when she spoke softly. "Sam," I turned to her, seeing a serious expression. "You remember I'm pregnant, right?" "Yes, Holly, I remember. It's just that many men aren't interested in an instant family. I wanted to make sure you knew. Of course, we just met, and there's a lot to learn about each other, but your pregnancy isn't a problem." "Okay, Sam, I just wanted to be sure you understand." "I understand," I said with a smile. "I'll be back with your car and dinner." I waited for my Uber, which arrived about 10 minutes later. The ride was uneventful, and I found her car easily. I picked up Italian food nearby and returned to Holly's house around 7 p.m. She had changed into a dress. I wanted to look nice for our first date. "You looked great before, but you still look better," I said. She smiled as I set the food on the table. By the time I came back, she was on her feet with crutches. I moved to help her, but she stopped me. "I need to practice. Mom won't be home for a few days." I motioned her to a chair and she sat down, smelling of freshly applied perfume. "You look and smell wonderful, Holly. I suddenly feel underdressed." "Oh, you look fine. I don't like men who are too formal." We chatted about everything. I told her about my job at Tim's company, Durham Commercial Services, and she shared about her part-time job at a local car dealership. Her mom worked as a legal secretary. Holly's father left when she was 5, and she hasn't seen him since. She was an only child. I told her about my failed marriage. She was shocked by what Pauline had done, but didn't seem pleased with my handling of the Karen and Wendy situation. Saying it out loud, I realized I wasn't pleased with myself either. Pauline was right. They were just acting like teenagers, and I needed to act like an adult. I had to figure out how to fix it. I purposely refrained from asking Holly about her 4-month pregnancy sans a partner. It wasn't my place, and I aimed to avoid any appearance of judgment. Stepping outside to give her privacy during her call with her mother, I admired the serene night, pondering over Holly's situation. Since my divorce, I hadn't pursued a long-term relationship, but perhaps it was time to reconsider. Did I want to be perpetually alone due to my ex's infidelity? Addressing the emotions stemming from my past marriage was imperative. After her call, Holly signaled for me to return inside, expressing gratitude for the privacy. We spent the evening chatting on the couch, deliberately avoiding the topic of her pregnancy. As the night progressed, our yawns hinted it was time to retire. Accompanied by her crutches, she escorted me to the door, where we shared a brief kiss and made plans for Sunday. Driving home, I felt elated, and I slept soundly. The next morning, I arrived at Holly's with breakfast from a nearby cafe. Knocking on the door, I waited as she answered, clearly just rising from bed. "Do you really get up this early every morning?" she asked, squinting and smiling. "Construction starts early. I've been waiting for a decent hour." "Well, you brought breakfast, so you're forgiven." We shared another brief kiss, and I made breakfast while she settled into a chair. She loved the food, as I knew she would. I suggested we spend the day exploring the countryside since I hadn't seen much of North Carolina apart from work and Tim's parties. It was a beautiful day, and we had a great time. We visited a museum that had motorized carts so Holly didn't have to walk much. We had lunch at a small local diner and spent hours relaxing in a park. Holly often made light physical contact with me, which felt nice. By the time we got back to her place, she was very tired and her leg hurt. I helped her take a bath, covering the brace with plastic, and then helped her into bed. We agreed I would come over after work the next evening. I brought tacos from a local taqueria, and we talked while I gave her a foot massage. She soon dozed off. I tucked her into bed and prepared to leave. As I was leaving, she sleepily thanked me for coming and mentioned that her mother was coming home the next day. I figured she was letting me know she wouldn't need my help as much once her mother returned. The next night, I was in my apartment, preparing to watch a World War II documentary and forcing myself to eat a frozen meal. What exactly is Salisbury steak? Then the phone rang. "Hello? Where are you?" Holly's sweet voice asked. "I'm home." "Why aren't you here? I thought you were coming." "I thought you didn't want me there since your mom was coming home." "You reminded me of that last night," I replied, feeling a bit embarrassed. "Men," she said, "I told you so you'd be ready to meet her. We've been waiting for you." "Okay, I'm on my way." Holly met me at the door with a lingering kiss and put her arms around my neck. I could get used to this, I thought. Inside, her mom, Barbara, was setting the dining table. They looked almost like twins, except Barbara's blonde curls were more groomed. She was fit and only slightly heavier than Holly. When I moved for a handshake, she hugged me tightly and kissed my cheek. "I'm so happy to meet you, Sam. Holly has told me so much about you." "It's my pleasure, Miss Allison." "Call me Barbara." And for the record, Allison is Holly's last name, not mine. Mine is Smith from my third husband. I don't plan on a fourth. Holly rolled her eyes at her mom's revelation, which was helpful since the food was ready. I washed my hands, and we sat down to eat. Barbara had made delicious stuffed pasta and garlic bread. "I'm sorry for the confusion, Barbara. I thought Holly meant I wasn't expected since you were coming home." "It's okay, Sam. Misunderstandings happen. I was just happy to meet Holly's new boyfriend." I glanced at Holly, who smiled at me. "She's told me quite a bit about you. I understand you're in construction." "I work for Durham Commercial Services. We handle construction, pest control, electrical, and plumbing. It's more home maintenance than construction. Do you like it?" "I like working with my hands. My boss hinted I might become a project manager soon." "What do you do?" "I'm a legal secretary, working directly with senior partners. I have a lot of late nights and travel. Thank you for taking care of Holly when she was injured." "It was my pleasure, Barbara. It's been a long time since I've had someone to care for." I felt a pang of sadness as memories of my girls surfaced. Holly and Barbara seemed to notice. We chatted throughout dinner, and I helped clean up. By the time we finished, it was late. Holly and Barbara said goodnight, and Barbara hugged me again before heading to bed. Holly asked me to turn off the lights while she watched a movie on Netflix. We lay down together on a deep couch, with me behind her. It was a romantic movie, but I focused on the beautiful woman in front of me. Soon we made love. The credits were rolling, and we lay happily together. Minutes passed, and we both drifted to sleep. I woke up about an hour later. "You should probably get going, you have work tomorrow." Holly broke the silence. I knew she was right, but I didn't want to leave. I was willing to get up early and go home before work if needed. We walked to the front door. "I'll see you tomorrow." As I drove away, I saw her still standing in the doorway, waving. Last night felt like an exploration to see how we fit together. I didn't want to leave again, so I brought a change of clothes for tomorrow just in case. I wouldn't mention it to Holly unless it came up. Barbara met me at the door, and I joined Holly on the couch. When Barbara called us to dinner, there were only 2 plates. Holly and I sat down, and Barbara excused herself, returning 30 minutes later looking ready for a night out. "If Holly didn't mention, I have a date tonight. I'll be back in the morning. Have a nice evening. I'd been at the construction site for a little over 2 weeks since Holly fell. We spent almost every night together, though some nights were just sleeping because I was overworking myself. Events repeated as Tim and Oscar drove up to the site together. I glanced around to see if anyone looked guilty of snitching on me, but nothing seemed unusual. I wasn't worried since I hadn't had a drink since the hospital, but I was annoyed at another attempt to snitch. Tim headed to the house where we were working, and Oscar waited by the truck. Tim praised the workers and then approached me. "Got a minute, Sam?" I nodded and followed him, expecting trouble. "No trouble, Sam. I was visiting sites and wanted to check in. You haven't been to the last couple of parties, which I get, and I just wanted to see how you're doing." "I'm doing great, Tim. I've started seeing someone." "That's great, Sam. Any luck with the kids?" "I'll need some time off to fly down and see them. Just let me know when and for how long, and I'll make sure you're covered." "I'll check flights tonight and let you know." I flew out the following Tuesday, assuming the girls might not be home over the weekend. Hoping to keep them overnight, I splurged on a nicer hotel room with 2 double beds, determined to repair our relationship. As the plane flew through the clouds, I thought about Holly and our goodbye. She helped me book flights and pack. She was getting around better, but I still carried her up the stairs to my apartment, and for the first time we made love in my bed. We returned to her house when it was time for me to leave for the airport. She said goodbye at the door. "I'm going to miss you, Sam." "Yep, I love you." She looked worried as she said she loved me for the first time. She shouldn't have worried. I lifted her chin to look into her eyes. "I love you too, Hollywood. I'll be back as soon as I can." She smiled broadly, hugged me again, and then I left. The warm feeling stayed with me all the way to Austin. My flight landed in the afternoon. I grabbed a bite to eat, checked into the hotel, and bought a few things for my stay. I waited, knowing the girls would come home from school around 4:30. I assumed they still did homework until dinner, sticking with that assumption until I found out otherwise. I pulled up to the house in my rental car at 5:15. Pauline's Toyota and an old Nissan were in the driveway, but Dave's car was missing, likely still at work. No one came out as I walked up, so I knocked on the door. A voice called out, "Coming!" and Pauline appeared. She looked as beautiful as ever, but I realized I had no feelings for her anymore. She hugged me tightly, surprising me. "Sam, oh my God, you're back. The girls will love it," she said. "No, Pauline, I haven't moved back. I flew in to see the girls." She looked disappointed, likely for the girls' sake. "Oh, they're working on their homework. I'll get them."
Wait, Pauline, I need to tell you something first.
She closed the door and listened, looking alarmed. "I'm sorry for how I spoke to you on the phone." I was hurt and angry. "I said you were drunk," she added. "Yes, I was. I couldn't take care of myself, let alone the girls. You didn't deserve that, and I wanted to apologize." "Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. It's been hard for everyone." "Are you here long?" "I'm flying out Sunday. I was hoping the girls could stay with me for a few days." "Why not for the whole time? I'll pack for them." "Thank you, Pauline. Can you come over tomorrow to talk after you take the girls to school?" "Or just us?" Taking a deep breath, I agreed. "Of course, Pauline." She smiled, pleased. "Okay, tomorrow then. I'll get the girls." A minute later, the girls came running out, tackling me with apologies and "I love you." We ended up on the lawn with them piled on top of me. I stopped them to speak. "Girls, you don't need to apologize. What happened was my fault. I didn't handle it well." "But we could have been more careful," Wendy said. "You'd be giving teenagers a bad reputation," I joked. "Let's focus on moving forward. Your mom said you can stay with me until Sunday, so pack your bags." "But this weekend," one started. "Don't worry about this weekend," Pauline interrupted. "Go and get ready." The girls ran off and I asked Pauline, "This weekend?" "We were planning to take them to the lake, but this is more important." "Thank you, Pauline. I didn't mean to disrupt your plans." She nodded and went to check on the girls. I ensured my rental car had room for their bags, and soon we were on our way. At the hotel, we unpacked and went to Texas Roadhouse for dinner. I groaned when Karen ordered a salad, but Wendy made up for it by ordering a steak and baked potato. Sometimes you have to live a little. We spent the evening catching up. Karen had found a boyfriend named Rob, who was in several of her classes. She showed me a picture, and he seemed nice enough, though as a father, it's never easy to see your daughter with a boyfriend. After some time, I made them finish their homework while I relaxed online, feeling grateful that my past anger hadn't cost me my relationship with my daughters. They caught me looking at them a few times and we exchanged smiles, which was sweet. The next morning, I drove them to school and then headed to my old house to talk to Pauline. I didn't see the point since we were long divorced, but I agreed. Pauline opened the door as I arrived and offered me water. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where she'd once told me she wanted a divorce. "Thanks for coming, Sam," she started. "Unless it's about the kids, I don't see the point," I replied. "Sam, it's been 4 years and we've never really talked. I know you were hurt and part of me still cared. I hoped your anger would fade, but it hasn't. Why? Has anything changed?" "No, nothing's changed. You still cheated on me." She tried to interrupt, but I stopped her. "Whether you had physical contact with him before or after serving me, you still cheated. You lied about where you were, spent time with him, and developed feelings that led to you leaving me. You destroyed our family and left me struggling, seeing the girls only 4 days a month while you got the majority of their time and financial stability. Sam, I didn't marry Dave for the money. We love each other and are happy."
Good for you, but that doesn't help me.
"Why should I be happy just because you are? I wanted you to know I didn't divorce you to hurt you or for money. It just happened." "Great. I'm glad ruining my life didn't trouble you too much. See, you always twist things to make me seem evil. That's not what it's about. Whether you intended to or not, you knew it would happen. Divorce usually means the mother gets the kids and the father becomes part-time." I slammed my hand on the table. "It wouldn't have happened if you stayed true. You had to open yourself up to fall for Dave. All those times you spent together were a direct attack on our marriage and you did nothing to stop it. If you think we can be friends, you're wrong. I'll be polite when necessary, but that's it." "Sam, you're right. I'm sorry, I was wrong, but isn't there a way for you to forgive me even if you can't forget?" I tried to stay calm. "Pauline, because of you and that idiot, I lived like a broke college student for years, barely having enough to eat and living in a crappy apartment. I'm sorry, Sam, but how could I have known that? You didn't know because you chose not to know. You knew my income, where I lived, and the rent was on the website. You knew how much child support you were getting. It was simple math, Pauline, but you didn't care to find out what situation you left me in. You had your life and a new, wealthier husband. Who cared about me? The girls didn't say anything, so I figured you ignored it. I made sure my pantry and fridge were full when they visited. The rest of the time, I lived on ramen and mac and cheese, saving to take them out and buy that video game. You bought it anyway, like it was nothing. You know what? Screw civility. If we have to be in the same place, just stay away from me, Sam. Is there anything else you want to say? Pauline? This may be your last chance. Sam, I'm sorry, I had no idea it was this bad. You're right, it never occurred to me to find out. I thought you'd say something. Yeah, having my wife leave me for my best friend wasn't humiliating enough. Let me tell them how hard I'm struggling financially." Pauline sighed, thinking, I wanted to leave but stayed to finish this. "Sam, you're right, I didn't see your perspective. It was easier for me not to know the truth. I felt guilty and assumed you were managing. There's no point in facts ruining your reality, is there? I guess it was naive to think we'd all be friends again. I guess so. But we have our daughters to raise. I'd like to work out visits over the summer and vacations." "Of course, Sam. I'll never keep them from you. As long as you're in a good place, we can work something out." Despite the unpleasant conversation, I was glad it was over. Now I knew Pauline's attempts to talk were just to ease her guilt. I picked up the girls from school, and we went to a mini golf course. We had a great time and then headed back to the hotel. They did homework while I ordered pizza. Over dinner, they asked me about my life in North Carolina. I apologized again for my past behavior, and they reassured me they were happy we were back together. They were also curious about Holly. "Geez, Dad," Wendy said, "you're almost done with us and now you're starting over? That's another 18 years. You know you're almost 40, right?" We laughed, and it was great to banter with them again. I think I remember that. With my advanced age, I might need a modified wheelchair to keep up with a young kid. We all burst into laughter. After dinner, they did more homework while I surfed the internet. I called Holly when they were asleep, and we caught up, expressing how much we missed each other. After we hung up, I went to bed. The rest of the visit was similar: dinner on Friday, bowling, and mini golf on Saturday. We didn't have to worry about school, so I had an early flight on Sunday and wanted to spend as much time with them as possible. They didn't mind missing out on friends or the lake. On Sunday morning, I drove them home. At their insistence, I went inside to say goodbye to Pauline. I tried to be a good role model, but it took all my energy. I hadn't seen Dave, and I assumed he was avoiding me. The flight home was bittersweet. I missed my girls, but was glad everything went well. I really missed Holly and looked forward to seeing her again. I took a cab from the airport straight to her house. Barb opened the door and directed me to Holly's bedroom. "She's waiting for you," Barb said, smiling and winking. By June, I had moved in with Holly and Barbara. I was there almost every night, so when my lease ended, I didn't renew it. This saved me a lot on rent, although I insisted on contributing to household expenses. I sent my daughters to visit in mid-June after school ended, giving them a week to relax before spending Father's Day with me in North Carolina. Holly bonded with them instantly, taking them out for fun activities while I was at work. Every night, Karen and Wendy would tell me how much fun they were having and ask when I would propose. I confided that I already had the ring and was just waiting for the right moment. They loved being in on the secret. We had many tears when the girls left at the end of June. I hoped they could visit again before school started in August, but it wasn't guaranteed. The next planned visit was Thanksgiving. I wanted to visit them in Texas, but with work and Holly's upcoming delivery, I wasn't sure if that would work out. We decided to celebrate the 4th of July at Tim's party. When we arrived, Tim greeted us by name, and I realized for the first time that he and Holly knew each other. We didn't get to talk much, but he congratulated Holly on the baby. I went to get food for us, knowing Holly's appetite had increased. As I loaded my plate, Tim approached me. "You didn't tell me you were dating Holly." "I didn't know it mattered," I replied. "I didn't know you knew each other." "She's a friend of a friend. She came to some parties last year, including a Halloween party." He looked thoughtful, so I asked, "What's going on, Tim?" "How far along is she?" he asked. "About 8 months." "Why?" "Do you remember the Halloween party?" "Not much, I was still drinking then." "Why?" "I saw you go into a spare bedroom with Holly that night. She was dressed as Wonder Woman with a dark wig and a mask." I paused, remembering that night. "Okay, let's say you're right. So what?" "Sam, this could be your baby." Tim's words hit me hard. Holly and I hadn't discussed our pasts much. It was time to do that. I set the food aside and found Holly. Seeing the look on my face, she became worried. "Sam, what's wrong?" she asked as I sat her down. "Holly, I never asked about how you got pregnant. I thought it was your business, but now I feel I need to ask." "I've always considered it my business." "Why do you need to know? Do you trust me, Holly?" "Completely, Sam, with my life. I promise I'll explain, but first, can you tell me what happened?" She paused, then continued. "Terry had broken up with me a few months before. We'd been together for years, and he kept saying he didn't need a marriage certificate to commit. He left me for a 20-year-old blonde with fake bosoms. It was devastating." "What did you do?" "Some women get promiscuous to prove their desirability. I withdrew. I ignored people and became very depressed. My mom eventually pushed me to do something, so I agreed to go with friends to Tim's Halloween party. I'd met Tim before, but didn't really know him. He was okay with me coming because my friends had told him what happened. I didn't drink much, but I was pretty drunk. There was this guy at the party, and I was pretty needy, and we ended up in one of the bedrooms. He's the father of my baby. I'm sorry, Sam, I never wanted to tell you about this." "It's okay, Holly, I understand, but this has a point. Are you sure he's the father? Was there anyone else around that time?" She looked curious but answered, "No, Sam, I haven't been with anyone else since Terry broke up with me until our first time together." "What did this guy look like?" "I don't really know. He was taller than me and in good shape. We were all in costumes and masks." "What kind of costume? Sam, why does this matter?" "Please, Holly, it's important." He was wearing a Scottish costume with a loose white shirt and a kilt. He had a beret and a set of kids' plastic bagpipes. I showed her a picture on my phone. "Did he look like this?" Her eyes widened and she jumped up. "This is him. Why do you have his picture?" "Babe, I needed to be sure before I said anything." "What are you sure about?" "Holly, the person in this picture is me." She looked stunned and collapsed into a chair. "Tim took a picture of me at the party last year. Holly, I think the baby you're carrying is mine." She stared at me, then looked down at her stomach and back up to me. Is it your baby?" "Looks like it." "Oh my God, Sam, wishes really do come true." "What?" I asked, confused. "Since I met you, I wanted it to be your baby, not some random stranger's. I know that didn't matter to you, and that's one of the reasons I love you so much, but I wanted it to be our baby in every way. And now it is." "Oh, Sam, I'm so happy." Holly and I got married at the courthouse a few weeks before Ashley Barbara Beckman was born. After Holly recovered from childbirth, we threw a big party. Barbara surprised everyone by marrying one of the firm's partners and retiring to travel in an RV. She confided in me that she was waiting for Holly to decide on her next steps. Eventually, she narrowed down her dating pool to one person. With nothing tying us to North Carolina but my job, we moved to Texas to be closer to my daughters. I landed a better-paying job thanks to my experience with Tim, allowing Holly to stay home full-time with our growing family. During my time in North Carolina, Tim didn't settle down with anyone long-term. Back in Texas, after 2 years, we attended a wedding where we met a bride we didn't know, By the time I returned to Austin, Karen was starting college at UT and Wendy was finishing high school. She had options for college, and I supported her decisions. Pauline and Dave hit a rough patch, possibly due to trust issues stemming from Pauline's past infidelity. It coincided with Karen leaving for college, leading Dave to have more free time. While I didn't dwell on their problems, part of me saw it as karma. My fiance's ex-wife had an emergency, so he left me to care for his sick son and vanished for a week. He then called to say he wasn't coming back. Now his parents have disowned him and gave me his house. I, female 32, have been engaged to my fiancé, male 38, for about 8 months now. We've been living together in his house for the past year. He has a 7-year-old son from his previous marriage who is autistic and often sick. The boy needs a lot of special care and attention. Last week, my fiancé got a call from his ex-wife. She lives in another state, about a 6-hour drive away. He told me there was some kind of emergency, and he needed to go help her. I was surprised because they don't usually have much contact beyond discussing their son's care, but I understood that emergencies happen. So I said okay. He left that same day, saying he'd probably be back in 2 to 3 days. It's now been a week, and he's still not back. I've been calling him every day, and he always says the same thing, that it's taking longer than expected and he'll be back soon. But he never gives me any details about what's actually going on. Meanwhile, I'm here alone, taking care of his son. It's really hard. I care about the boy, but I'm not trained to handle his special needs. He has meltdowns that I don't know how to manage. He needs help with basic tasks that I'm not always sure how to do right, and he's been sick with a fever for the past couple of days, which is scary because I don't know his medical history well. I'm getting more frustrated and worried each day. Why won't my fiancé tell me what the emergency is? Why is it taking so long? I'm starting to wonder if there's really an emergency at all or if something else is going on. I've tried asking him directly what the problem is, but he just gives vague answers like, "It's complicated," or "I'll explain when I get back." I'm not sure what to think. Part of me is worried that something serious has happened and he's protecting me from bad news, but another part of me is suspicious that he might be lying about the whole thing. I'm exhausted from taking care of his son 24/7. I love the boy, but this is way more than I signed up for. I'm not his parent, and I don't feel equipped to be his sole caregiver for an extended period. I'm scared I might mess up and do something wrong. I'm also hurt that my fiancé doesn't seem to understand how difficult this is for me. He barely asks how we're doing when I call. He hasn't offered to come back or send someone else to help. It's like he's forgotten about us. I don't know what to do. I can't leave his son alone, but I'm at my wit's end. I'm considering calling my fiancé's parents to see if they can come help, but I'm worried about overstepping or causing drama. I also don't want to embarrass my fiancé if there really is a serious situation he's dealing with. Am I overreacting? Should I be more patient? Or is this as weird as it feels to me? I'm starting to question our whole relationship. If he can just leave us like this with no explanation, what does that say about his commitment to me and our future? I could really use some advice. Has anyone been in a similar situation? What should I do? Wow, this blew up overnight. Thank you all for your responses and support. I'll try to answer some common questions. Yes, I've tried texting him. He responds, but with the same vague answers. No, I don't have contact info for his ex-wife. I've never met her. His son is in special education, but school is out for summer break right now. I work from home part-time, which is how I've been managing to care for him 24/7. My fiancé and I have been together for 2 years total. I've known his son for most of that time, but I've never been left alone with him for more than a day before. A lot of you are suggesting I call the police in his ex-wife's city to do a welfare check. I'm considering it, but I'm scared of causing problems if there really is a family emergency happening. I think I'm going to give him one more day to give me a real explanation. If he doesn't, I'll try calling his parents first, then consider calling the police. Some of you have asked for more background on our relationship and his previous marriage. I'll share what I know. My fiancé and his ex-wife were married for 9 years. They divorced when their son was 4. From what he's told me, the stress of caring for a child with special needs was a big factor in their split. His ex-wife struggled with depression and felt overwhelmed. They tried counseling but ultimately decided to separate. The divorce wasn't super messy, but it wasn't exactly amicable either. They disagreed a lot about their son's care and custody arrangements. Eventually, they settled on my fiancé having primary custody, with his ex getting visitation 1 weekend a month and for a week during summer and winter breaks. My fiancé told me that his ex-wife loves their son but has a hard time coping with his needs, which is why she agreed to limited custody. She pays child support, but often late. My fiancé doesn't like to talk about her much, but he's mentioned that she's had some personal struggles since the divorce. I got the impression he meant mental health or maybe substance issues, but he never gave details. When I met my fiancé, he had been divorced for about a year. He was upfront about having a special needs child and made sure I understood what I was getting into. I've always known that his son is his top priority, which I respect. It's one of the things I love about him. He's an amazing, devoted father. Our relationship progressed pretty quickly. We moved in together after dating for a year, and he proposed 4 months after that. Things have been good overall. He's kind, hardworking, and treats me well. We've had some challenges adjusting to life as a blended family, but nothing major until now. That's why the situation is so confusing and hurtful. It's completely out of character for him to be so uncommunicative and to leave us like this. I keep wondering if I've missed some signs or red flags along the way. A few more details about his son, since many have asked. He's 7 years old and nonverbal. He communicates mainly through a tablet app and some basic signs. He's prone to meltdowns when his routine is disrupted or when he's overstimulated. He has several food allergies and sensitivities that require a special diet. He also has epilepsy, which is mostly controlled with medication but still leads to occasional seizures. Physically, he's small for his age and has some motor skills delays. He needs help with things like bathing, dressing, and using the bathroom. He wears pull-ups at night and sometimes during the day if we're going out for a long time. He goes to a special education program during the school year, which provides speech therapy, occupational therapy, and other services. When he's home, he usually needs constant supervision. He has trouble sleeping and often wakes up multiple times a night. I've helped care for him before, but always with my fiancé present. This is my first time being solely responsible for him, and it's overwhelming. I'm terrified of doing something wrong or missing a sign that he needs medical attention. Some people have suggested I call his doctor or therapist for advice. That's a good idea, and I think I'll do that today. I'm going to make a list of all his care providers and see if I can get some guidance. I'm still unsure about the next steps with my fiancé. Part of me wants to give him the benefit of the doubt, but another part feels like this is unforgivable, regardless of the reason. I'm going to sleep on it and decide in the morning whether to call his parents or the police. Thank you again for all your advice and support. I'll update when I have more information. Update, I have an update, but it's not good news. I finally broke down and called my fiancé's parents this morning. They had no idea he was even out of town. They were shocked and immediately drove over to help with their grandson. While they were on their way, I decided to bite the bullet and call the police department in his ex-wife's city to request a welfare check. The officer I spoke to was very understanding and said they'd send someone to her address. About an hour later, the police called me back. They said they made contact with both my fiancé and his ex-wife. Both are fine. There is no emergency. The officer couldn't give me more details due to privacy laws, but he emphasized that there was no evidence of any crime or danger. I was processing this information with my future in-laws when my fiancé finally called. He said he knew I must be upset and confused, and that he was coming home immediately to explain everything in person. He asked me not to make any decisions until we could talk face-to-face. I don't know what to think. I'm relieved that he's okay, but I'm also furious and hurt. What possible explanation could there be for abandoning us like this? His parents are just as confused and upset as I am. They've offered to stay with us until he gets back, which should be late tonight. I'm grateful for their help with their grandson, but I'm dreading the conversation to come. I feel like our entire relationship has been called into question. I'll update again after we talk. Thank you all for your support during this crazy situation. Update, I've been staring at my screen for hours trying to find the right words to explain what's happened. My hands are shaking as I type this, and I still can't quite believe it's real, but I promised to update you all, so here goes. Last night, instead of coming home as he'd promised, my fiancé called. I answered immediately, relief flooding through me at the sight of his name on my phone. That relief was short-lived. "I'm not coming home," he said, his voice oddly calm. "I'm staying here with Sarah." Sarah, his ex-wife, the woman he'd claimed needed emergency help. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "What do you mean you're not coming home?" I managed to choke out. "What about your son? What about us?" There was a long pause before he spoke again. "Sarah and I have decided to give our marriage another try. We've reconnected over the past week, and we both feel like this is the right thing to do." I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. "But your son," I stammered, "he needs you. He's autistic. He needs stability and routine. You can't just leave him." Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost ashamed. "We've talked about it, and we feel it would be too difficult to care for a child with such high needs while we're rebuilding our relationship. We think it's best if he stays with you and my parents for now." I saw red. The man I thought I knew, the devoted father I'd fallen in love with, would never say something like this. would never abandon his child, especially one with special needs. You're leaving your autistic son because he's inconvenient to your new life plans? I hissed, fury replacing my shock. Who are you? I don't even recognize you right now. He tried to explain, to justify his actions, but I wasn't hearing it. I let him know exactly how disgusted and hurt I was. I called him a coward, a terrible father, a liar. I told him I would be informing the authorities about his abandonment of his son. You can't do that, he protested weakly. Watch me, I snapped and hung up. I sat there in stunned silence for a few minutes, my mind reeling. Then I heard a small voice behind me. Where's Daddy? I turned to see my fiancé's son standing in the doorway, clutching his tablet. My heart broke all over again. How was I going to explain this to him? I managed to get him back to bed with vague reassurances that Daddy would be home soon. It felt like a lie, but I didn't know what else to say. Once he was asleep, I called my fiancé's parents. They arrived an hour later, looking worried and confused. I sat them down and told them everything. His mother broke down crying, while his father's face turned redder and redder as I spoke. He said, "What about his son?" His father thundered when I finished. That it would be too difficult? Too difficult? I'll show him difficult. His mother was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't understand, she kept saying. This isn't like him at all. He loves that boy more than anything. We stayed up most of the night, alternating between anger, confusion, and grief. By morning, we had a plan. First thing, we went to the police station. The officers were very concerned when we explained the situation. They took detailed statements from all of us and said they would be opening an investigation into child abandonment. We take cases involving special needs children very seriously, the detective assured us. We'll be looking into this thoroughly. Next, we met with a lawyer to discuss custody options. Since my fiancé and I weren't married, I had no legal rights to his son. His parents, however, could file for emergency custody as next of kin. The lawyer started the paperwork immediately. Throughout all of this, my phone was blowing up with messages and missed calls from my fiancé. I ignored them all. I couldn't bear to hear his voice or read his excuses. When we got home, his parents sat me down at the kitchen table. They looked exhausted and heartbroken, but there was a steely determination in their eyes. We've made a decision, his father said, his voice gruff with emotion. We're disowning him. I blinked in surprise. Are you sure? That's a big step. His mother nodded, wiping away a tear. We can't condone what he's done, abandoning his child, lying to all of us. It's unforgivable. We don't want anything to do with someone who would do that, even if he is our son. We raised him better than this, his father added. I don't know what's gotten into him, but I do know I can't call someone who would abandon their special needs child my son. I nodded, understanding their pain and anger all too well. We also wanted to talk to you about the house and our grandson, his mother continued. We want you to stay here as long as you need to. We know this has been a huge shock, and we don't want you to have to worry about finding a new place on top of everything else. I started to protest, but she held up a hand to stop me. Please, let us do this. You've been so good to our grandson, and we know he trusts you. We think it would be best if he stays here with you for now, where things are familiar. We'll take custody, but we want him to have as much stability as possible. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Their kindness was overwhelming, especially in the midst of their own pain. Thank you, I managed to whisper. The next few days were a blur of activity. We had meetings with social workers, more talks with lawyers, and lots of conversations with my ex-fiancé's son, trying to explain what was happening in terms he could understand. It was heartbreaking to see his confusion and distress. He kept asking for his daddy, not understanding why he wasn't coming home. We did our best to comfort him, but how do you explain to a 7-year-old autistic child that his father has abandoned him? My ex continued to call and text. I finally read some of his messages. They were a mixture of apologies, justifications, and pleas for understanding. He said he still loved his son but felt this was for the best. He said he and Sarah were planning to move to another state for a fresh start. He asked me not to tell the authorities, saying it would only complicate things. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I forwarded all the messages to the detective handling the case. As the days turned into weeks, we settled into a new routine. My ex's parents came over every day to help with their grandson. We worked together to maintain his schedule as much as possible, knowing how important routine was for him. I threw myself into learning everything I could about caring for a child with autism. I read books, joined online support groups, and had long talks with his doctors and therapists. It was overwhelming at times, but I was determined to do right by this little boy who had been through so much. His grandparents were amazing through it all. They were there for every meltdown, every sleepless night, every small victory. They never complained, even though I knew they were still processing their own grief and anger over their son's actions. One night, about a month after everything happened, I was sitting on the porch after finally getting my ex's son to sleep. His grandmother came out and sat beside me. "How are you holding up, dear?" she asked gently. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I'm managing. It's hard, but we're getting there." She nodded, patting my hand. "You're doing an amazing job. We can't thank you enough for sticking by our grandson through all of this." I felt tears pricking at my eyes. "I love him," I said simply. "I couldn't imagine walking away no matter how hard it gets." She smiled sadly. "That's what being a parent is all about. It's a shame our son couldn't understand that." We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars come out. "Have you heard anything more from him?" she asked eventually. I shook my head. "Not since last week. He sent another long email trying to explain himself. I didn't respond." She sighed heavily. "I never thought I'd say this about my own child, but I'm glad he made his choice and now he has to live with the consequences." I nodded, feeling a mix of sadness and anger. I keep wondering if there were signs I missed, if I should have seen this coming somehow. She squeezed my hand. "Don't do that to yourself. None of us saw this coming. He fooled all of us." As we sat there, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. A month ago, I thought I knew what my future looked like. I was going to marry a man I loved, be a stepmother to his special needs son, and build a life together. Now that future was gone. In its place was something I never could have imagined. I was living in my ex-fiance's house, helping to raise his son alongside his parents. My days were filled with therapy appointments, meltdown management, and countless small challenges. It wasn't the life I had planned, but as I sat there on the porch, I realized it was a life I was coming to love. This little boy, who had been abandoned by his own father, had stolen my heart completely. His grandparents, who had every right to walk away from this mess, had instead embraced me as family. Yes, there was still pain. Yes, there were still moments when I wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. But there was also love and purpose and a sense of belonging I hadn't expected to find in the aftermath of such betrayal. As for my ex-fiancé, I've heard through the grapevine that he and his ex-wife did indeed move out of state. The police investigation is ongoing, and there will likely be legal consequences for his actions. Part of me hopes he'll face justice for what he's done, but mostly I just hope he stays away. His son deserves better, and we're all determined to give him the love and stability he needs. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand why my ex did what he did, but I do know that I'm exactly where I need to be right now, helping to care for a little boy who deserves all the love in the world. Thank you all for your support throughout this incredibly difficult time. Your kind words and advice have meant more than you know. I may not update again for a while, as I want to focus on our new family dynamic and giving my ex's son all the attention he needs. But know that your support has made a real difference in our lives.
Morning, I found myself in the middle of our busy routine, getting our 2 kids ready for school. At 7:30, the chaos was briefly interrupted by the loud ringing of the phone. I became curious, wondering who could be calling at such an early hour. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar code, which piqued my interest even more. "Hello?" I answered cautiously, holding the phone to my ear. To my surprise, it was Claire, my wife, on the other end of the line. I couldn't help but wonder why she was calling when we had just spoken the night before. Claire works for a small marketing firm, and her call immediately grabbed my attention. I take care of our children and work from home, while she's always on the move, working at a printing company in the center of our town. Despite our different schedules, it worked well for us, and we managed to make a decent living. We live in a cozy suburban house with 4 bedrooms and a swimming pool, and we're fortunate to have a wide circle of friends. However, Claire told me that the previous night, when she went to the hotel lobby to get a newspaper, her purse was stolen. "Please cancel our credit cards immediately and request new ones urgently. I've already informed Joy, my boss, about this, and she'll arrange for new American Express Company cards to be sent to me overnight so I can have them before I leave tomorrow. She's also going to transfer some money to help me through this," my wife said, sounding worried. "You're usually very cautious with your belongings. Can you clarify what occurred?" Regrettably, I was a bit absent-minded and left my purse at the cashier's counter while I went to grab some more reading material. When I returned, it was nowhere to be found. The cashier mentioned she was occupied with another customer and didn't notice anything unusual. My driver's license was in there too, but the hotel dispatched staff to check the nearby dumpsters. I hope they locate it. Otherwise, I might have to rely on a taxi for today's meeting. Don't worry, I'll handle the credit cards promptly. I apologize for my oversight, dear. Hopefully, apart from about $200 in my wallet, we won't face any additional expenses. We can replace the other cards gradually. Fortunately, most of my makeup is still in the room, so I'll be prepared for the morning presentation. How are the kids? I miss the times when we were all together. Let me recount what occurred around 6 weeks ago. Thankfully, I successfully canceled the credit cards before any unauthorized charges were made. However, the wallet containing my driver's license and other non-credit card items had yet to be recovered. So, I pushed that concern aside. Life continued as usual, but I have something important to share. Today, I came across a statement from Claire's Fidelity account, where she manages a separate investment fund from the inheritance she received after her parents' tragic accident a few years ago. I've always respected her privacy concerning this account, but while searching for our home insurance policy, I stumbled upon a folder containing monthly statements from her personal account. I recalled that the inheritance amounted to around $350,000 following her parents' passing, and I couldn't help but wonder how much it had grown. To my pleasant surprise, it had expanded to over $400,000. While going through the statement, I noticed a withdrawal of $3,000 from the money market account about 6 weeks ago. My curiosity was piqued regarding how she had utilized that money, so I decided to delve deeper into her money market account. To my astonishment, I discovered that she had written a substantial check to a local jewelry store just a couple of days after losing her purse in the same city. I couldn't help but wonder what she had purchased at that jewelry store. She hadn't mentioned buying anything for me, and I hadn't heard her discuss acquiring jewelry for anyone else. Although she has a brother, I couldn't comprehend why he would require a $3,000 gift. After some contemplation, I decided to turn to the computer and visit the jewelry store's website. I jotted down their phone number for further inquiry. I picked up the phone and dialed the jewelry store's number. A woman introduced herself as a store representative and inquired how she could be of assistance. After providing my name and specifying the transaction I wished to inquire about, I explained that we had encountered an issue with the purchase and were wondering if there was a store warranty in place. She proceeded to search for the transaction in her computer and then inquired about the nature of the problem with the rings. I found myself momentarily puzzled, wondering what kind of rings she could have bought. Fortunately, the woman on the phone swiftly clarified, "Oh, I remember this purchase. When she visited our store, she was visibly distressed and mentioned that her wedding and engagement rings had been stolen. She wanted to replace them, which proved to be quite a challenging task. While we were searching for suitable options to meet her needs, she used the company's credit card as collateral and later sent us a check to cover the cost. Now that you've mentioned the issue with the rings, I'd like to assure you that our store provides a 90-day warranty for such situations. Is it possible that the diamond setting has become loose? This is perplexing because she spoke of replacing the wedding and engagement rings but never indicated that she had lost them, only mentioning the theft of her purse. It took me some time to process this new information. Listen, I conveyed to the woman on the phone. I need to have a discussion about this with my wife before making any further decisions. I'll get back to you later. With that, I bid her farewell. While she appeared somewhat puzzled, my own bewilderment was far more overpowering. It was becoming increasingly apparent that the rings should have been inside her purse when it was stolen. But why would she carry them in her purse if she had no intention of concealing her marital status from others? To the best of my knowledge, there were no professional constraints related to revealing one's marital status. However, if she wanted to appear unmarried in specific social circumstances, disconcerting thoughts began to circulate in my mind, suggesting that she might have contemplated engaging in an extramarital affair while away from home. The mere notion of it made my stomach churn. We had been married for 11 years and were blessed with 2 wonderful children, Jeremy, age 7, and Melissa, age 6. I believed we had a flawless marriage and a picture-perfect family. Our personal life seemed gratifying to me, or at least that's what I had believed. She traveled once a month, staying for 2 or 3 nights in distant cities. If she harbored intentions of such actions, she might have seen it as a discreet opportunity. It seemed that losing the rings had deeply troubled her, leading her to opt for replacements that closely resembled the originals. I had purchased those rings with my modest earnings, so they were not extravagant, and crafting a near replica wasn't too costly. She could have reported the loss to the insurance company, but I probably would have found out. If her purse was genuinely stolen at the hotel, she should have reported it. I couldn't help but wonder what she claimed as missing. I decided to locate the hotel's contact number and made the call. I asked about any records related to the theft of my wife's purse. Surprisingly, they confirmed having a written account of the incident. I requested a copy to be faxed to me, and I received it shortly. The report was composed and signed by Claire herself. In the statement, Claire mentioned that her purse was stolen while she was dancing in the hall. She had left her purse at the booth where she was seated, and upon her return, it had vanished. Remarkably, Claire explicitly noted her hesitation to involve the police. As I absorbed this information, my thoughts raced. Overwhelmed by the implications of what I had uncovered, she had deceived me not only by concealing the truth about the stolen rings, but also by inventing a story about shoplifting. While there could be an alternative explanation, my mind couldn't come up with anything other than the unsettling thoughts swirling in my head. It became clear that I needed to uncover the significance of losing those rings, or else they would persistently occupy my thoughts and drive me to madness. One thing was increasingly evident. Those rings were inside her purse when she was dancing with an unknown man. Several weeks had elapsed since the incident, and she was about to embark on another trip in a few days. I realized I needed to gather more details about the schedule for her upcoming trip. I wanted to comprehend what she typically did in the evenings outside our home. If she was involved with other men, perhaps losing the rings had served as a wake-up call, prompting her to reassess her behavior. I knew that if I discovered her infidelity, it would likely spell the end of our marriage, though I dreaded considering how it might impact our children. She was undoubtedly a great mother, but I couldn't bear the thought of her having custody of the kids, especially with her frequent business trips. My mind raced, desperately seeking any potential clues to shed light on her faithfulness. What other information might hint at her actions during her trips? Did she engage in unprotected encounters or insist on using contraceptives? I assumed she would opt for protection because she wouldn't want to risk bringing home infections or the possibility of an unwanted pregnancy. After all, I had a vasectomy after the birth of our second child, rendering pregnancy impossible. She couldn't rely on the men she met having protection, so she must have had her own supply. One question remained. Where did she keep them? It was unlikely she stored them at our house or in the car, so the office seemed the most likely place. She probably carried them with her on business trips. I knew she transported her work papers, laptop, and presentation materials in a large briefcase she kept in her office. But if she had an early morning flight, she'd bring her bag home the night before, then pack it in a suitcase for the airport. This detail was crucial. I needed to find an opportunity to search the briefcase before her departure. I hoped her next trip involved an early morning flight. I made a deliberate choice to remain calm and composed, not displaying any signs that something was amiss. As it happened, when the kids returned from school, I was occupied with various tasks and had little time to dwell on my suspicions. Nonetheless, the specter of her infidelity continued to linger in the back of my mind. When Claire returned from work, I found myself in a bit of a mess. While preparing dinner, I accidentally spilled a dish of beans, creating a mess on the floor. The resulting chaos of cleaning up and managing the kids' activities left me looking somewhat disheveled. Fortunately, she didn't seem to notice any unusual behavior from me at that moment. After the commotion settled and everything was cleaned up, I greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. We sat down at the table as we normally did to enjoy dinner and engage in our typical chit-chat. Given our usual routine, I didn't expect her to have any growing suspicions about her upcoming trip. "So, you're heading out on another trip in a couple of days?" I asked. "Yes," she replied, with little enthusiasm. "It's the same old routine. I'm not looking forward to it." My curiosity prompted me to dig deeper. "If you don't enjoy it, have you considered applying for a different role? You've been with the company for quite some time and have a good understanding of various aspects of its operations. I think you could adapt to almost any position." She mentioned her desire to gain more experience before transitioning to a desk job. However, I gently appealed to her conscience regarding the kids. "And I really miss you when you're not home," I added, hoping to evoke a sense of guilt. "I know, I'm sorry," she responded sympathetically. "I miss all of you too." Seeking more details, I continued, "So where exactly are you headed this time? Will you be leaving in the morning, giving us a chance to spend some time together before your departure?" I held her gaze, mindful that our children could hear us. Despite trying to appear normal, my anxiety was evident as my stomach rumbled, making it difficult to eat. She seemed to think everything was fine, as her reaction mirrored mine. I wondered if she had stomach issues, but it turned out she was eating without much enjoyment. Perhaps my suspicions were unfounded, but the urge to search her briefcase still lingered, as it could potentially provide insight into her loyalty. "I'm only going to Denton, so I'll be leaving tomorrow morning at 7:30, she mentioned. "I need something to keep me going until I return on Friday," she added playfully, giving me a wink. I responded in a similar playful manner, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. To my surprise, she blushed in response. Her comment about bringing her briefcase home the night before her trip suggested she wouldn't be stopping at the office before heading to the airport. Given her seemingly genuine attitude about the upcoming trip in front of our children and me, one might assume that either she hadn't been involved in any infidelity during her travels, or she had become skilled at concealing such behavior. I hoped to uncover the truth when I examined the contents of her briefcase. On the evening before her planned trip, Claire returned home in high spirits. She parked her car next to mine in the garage as usual and appeared visibly excited. This left me wondering if her excitement was due to our conversation or if there was another reason behind it. Upon entering the house, she didn't bring her briefcase with her, assuming it was still in the car. I was busy preparing dinner, so we sat down at the table. She casually asked if I could retrieve her suitcase from the garage after we finished eating. "Certainly," I replied, trying not to show any signs of suspicion. "Are you all set for your trip?" she asked, trying to reassure me. "Oh yes, it's a routine trip. My briefcase is in the car, ready for the journey. I'll pack an overnight bag with the essentials." In an effort to maintain a sense of normalcy, I inquired, "Do you have any plans while you're away?" "No, the kids and I will stick to our usual daily routine during the week. Maybe we can plan something family-friendly for the weekend?" she replied, showing enthusiasm for the idea. "Sounds like a plan," I responded, genuinely. After we finished dinner, she kindly helped me clear the table in the kitchen and loaded the dishwasher. Once we were done, she headed to the bedroom to pack her things, while I made my way to the garage to retrieve her suitcase. Upon inspecting the car, I didn't find the briefcase inside, leading me to believe it was securely placed in the trunk. Expecting this, I had already devised a plan to access it later in the evening. When I returned to the bedroom with her suitcase, I casually asked, "Do you know where the car keys are? My tire seems to be slowly losing air. If I take it to the station, Jerry can fix it right away." For a brief moment, she appeared puzzled, but then reached for her purse, handing me the car keys. She proposed an alternative, saying, "Couldn't you just use the spare tire? It's meant for emergencies?" Taking a resolute stance, I responded, "Yes, the spare tire is for emergencies, but we have enough time to properly fix this. I think that's the best course of action." I hurried back to the garage before she could change her mind. Swiftly, I drove her car out of the garage and headed to the junction station owned by my friend Jerry from school. Pulling up in front of one of the service bays, I honked my horn to get his attention. Jerry noticed me and opened the bay door, allowing me to drive in before closing it behind me. "What's going on, buddy?" Jerry asked. Curiously, I replied, "My tire was supposed to be fixed here, but I needed a little time to check something else." Sensing that I might have some issues at home, he asked, "Trouble at home, buddy?" "Maybe," I admitted, reluctantly opening the trunk and retrieving Claire's briefcase. Placing it on a nearby workbench, I unlocked it. Jerry, realizing a customer needed him, simply said, "Well, I've got a customer, so take your time, my friend." Nodding to Jerry, he returned to the small shop attached to his station. I began to search the briefcase meticulously, ensuring that I didn't disturb anything. My hands explored the pockets on the lid unnecessarily, and to my shock, I discovered a package that drew my attention when I removed it. My heart sank as I realized it was an open package of contraceptives with about 3 pieces missing. My worst fears were confirmed. I carefully placed the package back where I found it and closed the briefcase once more. I stashed it in the trunk and secured it just as Jerry returned. "Did you find what you were looking for? What's going on?" he asked with evident curiosity. "I'm afraid so," I replied, my voice tinged with a mix of disappointment and sadness. "Mind if I stay here a bit longer? Perhaps you could check the tire pressure while I pretend to have resolved the issue." Jerry gave me a curious look, but complied without saying a word. He truly was a loyal friend. While he attended to the tire pressure, I drove out of the bay and pulled up at a gas station. I filled the tank with fuel, unsure of when I would do that for her again. My thoughts were filled with gratitude toward Jerry for his understanding as I made my way back home. As I pulled into the garage, a sense of darkness seemed to envelop my thoughts, and panic began to intensify. Fueled by anger and frustration, it was difficult to grasp how she could betray our marriage, our children, and me in such a manner. Amid the receding emotions, I shifted my focus to planning my next steps. To secure custody of our children, I needed concrete evidence of her infidelity and misconduct. Despite her shortcomings as a partner, I acknowledged her role as a good mother. The children deserved a maternal figure in their lives. While visitation rights would likely be granted, my ultimate goal was to gain full legal custody. She will have to explain the reasons behind our divorce to her brother and friends. As I entered the house, I called out from the bedroom saying, "Everything's set. It was just a minor issue with a nail." "Okay, thanks," she replied, still avoiding eye contact. Seeking solace, I went to the kitchen for a beer and then settled in the family room with the kids, who were absorbed in watching a TV show. About 30 minutes later, Claire joined us in the room and sat beside me on the couch. By then, my emotions had settled, but a deep sadness washed over me as I realized our once happy family was soon to be a thing of the past. To my surprise, Claire moved closer and snuggled up to me. Whispering in my ear, she asked, "Are you ready for tonight?" After taking a sip of beer, I replied, "I think so, but I have a stomachache." Claire sympathetically responded, "Oh, that's too bad, honey." Holding on to me, Claire softly said, "I love you," and I instinctively put my arm around her shoulders, grappling with mixed feelings. Despite her betrayal, there was still a hint of affection from her. I couldn't help but wonder why she did it. Was it for excitement or a need for more connection than I could provide? I might never fully understand, but what was clear was the damage to my trust in her. We put the kids to bed together, and as she kissed our little angels goodnight, I couldn't help but look at her, knowing that by morning she would be gone. Their young minds were already accustomed to her frequent travels, so their unease was minimal. That night, we made love, but it lacked the usual passion. Sensing my distress, Claire asked anxiously, "Is your stomach still bothering you, dear?" I nodded and replied, "Yes, but I can handle it." Desperately hoping she would choose our love and marriage over the upcoming trip, I asked, "Do you really need to go on this trip?" Deep down, I wished it were all just a nightmare that would vanish. She sighed and replied apologetically, "I'm sorry, honey, but this trip is necessary. I'll do my best to wrap things up and return home as soon as I can. I'm really looking forward to the weekend with all of you." With a heavy heart, I sighed and said, "Okay, honey, it's time to get some sleep. You have to get up early for your flight. I'll take a quick shower now so I won't have to worry about it in the morning." "Okay," I replied. While she stepped into the shower, an impulse led me to inspect her suitcase to see what she had packed. Though the clothes on top seemed businesslike, I was surprised to find, upon closer examination, a selection of her most seductive lingerie and a small black cocktail dress in which she always looked irresistible. Respecting her personal space, I carefully returned everything to its place, closed the suitcase, and went back to bed. I couldn't sleep that night, and when I heard Claire stirring around 5 in the morning, I remained in bed, choosing not to bid her farewell. As was our custom, I felt a mix of weariness and sadness. Bending down to give me a kiss on the cheek before leaving, she inquired, "Still not feeling well, honey?" I simply nodded, struggling to express the turmoil within me. With the sound of the garage door closing, I finally got out of bed and made my way to the shower. I knew the day ahead would be filled with challenges. After seeing the kids off to school and having breakfast, I turned to the phone book to search for a private detective services in the yellow pages. My main criteria were to locate an agency with a nationwide presence, preferably in the city Claire was heading to. I reached out to several agencies and eventually found one with a branch in her destination area. I set up a meeting with them for the same morning, hoping they could provide the necessary information. Next on my agenda was finding a divorce attorney. A friend had recommended a specific lawyer, so I found his contact details and gave him a call. I arranged an appointment for the afternoon, hoping this lawyer could guide me through the challenging process we were about to face. When I arrived at the private investigator's office, I discussed my concerns and arranged for Claire to be surveilled on the evening she was away. I provided them with a photo of Claire and details of her travel route to aid in their identification. They assured me they would gather photos and compile a report on her activities as soon as her business day concluded. To ensure seamless communication, they agreed to send information via email to their Denton office and promised to provide a comprehensive report by Monday morning. Satisfied with their commitment, I made a substantial upfront payment. As a prepayment for their services, they informed me they might not be able to capture photographs, but they would strive to provide as many incriminating photos as possible. I agreed that it would suffice. My afternoon meeting with the lawyer proceeded as anticipated. He explained that in our state, divorce follows a no-fault principle, meaning there's no need to assign blame. However, given that I am the primary caregiver for our children, it's likely I will be granted custody. It was crucial for me to understand that Claire would receive substantial visitation rights for our children. Furthermore, our property would be divided equally, with both sides getting an even split of 50%. Alimony wouldn't be necessary due to our similar incomes, but since I would have custody of the children, Claire would be obligated to pay alimony. As for the inheritance she obtained, it held no significance to me, and she needed to retain it for herself. My top priority was the well-being of our children. I instructed the lawyer to prepare the necessary documents to be delivered to Claire on Monday. Citing irreconcilable differences, I also asked her to agree to vacate our house immediately upon our divorce. The lawyer confirmed that, as the children's guardian, I had the authority to make this request. It was decided that once the children reached 18, we would sell the house, and the proceeds would be divided between us. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of contentment, realizing that life would move forward for me and the children, while Claire would have to face the consequences of her betrayal. At that moment, I didn't take immediate action concerning our finances, insurance, or other legal matters. I assumed I'd have sufficient time to address these issues after serving her with divorce papers. Given her inheritance, I believed she wouldn't have to be concerned about her share of our joint savings. When it was time for school to conclude, I headed home to catch the bus. On Friday afternoon, when Claire returned, I kindly offered to take care of her laundry, but she politely declined, insisting she would handle it later. I couldn't help but grin, recognizing how playfully mischievous I had been. Deep down, I fully comprehended why she preferred to manage the laundry herself. It was crucial for her to keep her extramarital affairs concealed at all costs. Later, as we lay in bed, Claire expressed worry about my ongoing stomach issues and suggested I see a doctor. "This has been persisting for too long," she emphasized. I playfully responded to Claire, letting her know that I intended to try a new medication recommended by a friend to address my persistent stomach problems. I expressed optimism that this would resolve the issue and bring her back to me soon. When we embraced, she whispered that she missed me greatly. On Monday, as the kids left for school and Claire headed to work, I received a call from the detective agency, informing me that they had a report ready. I told them I'd be there shortly, and within 30 minutes, I was sitting down with the office manager, discussing the details. The office manager informed me that a report with attached photos had been faxed from Denton that morning. He admitted he hadn't had time to read the entire report, but upon a quick scan and a glance at the photos, it seemed highly incriminating. I took a copy of the report and started reading its contents. The subject of the report was identified as Claire Barton. According to the report records, the surveillance of the woman began at 5:17 p.m. on Wednesday, June 16th, in the lobby of the Denton Marriott Hotel. Her identity was confirmed by comparing a photo obtained from the Merrickville office. Upon closer examination of the report, it turned out that she was wearing a company badge, further confirming her identity. Moreover, the report detailed the movements of the subject and noted she was carrying a briefcase. When she entered the elevator, a staff member accompanied her and verified her arrival at room 414 at 5:23 p.m. It's important to note that the report emphasized that the subject was alone at that time. Additionally, the report included a photograph labeled Exhibit 1A, showing the subject dressed professionally before entering the room. When looking at the photo, it was clear she still wore rings. Evidently, the photo was taken discreetly using a mobile phone. The report stated that the agents had rented a room across from the subject's room. At 6:31 p.m., they received a signal that the subject had left her room and was heading for the elevator. A minute later, at 6:32 p.m., the subject exited the elevator and entered the lobby. The report noted she was dressed as described in Example 1B. Upon examining Example 1B, it became evident that Claire was wearing a small black cocktail dress paired with high-heeled shoes. She was also adorned with a necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary celebration. However, what stood out the most was the absence of wedding rings on her left hand. The photo showed clearly that she wasn't wearing them. The report mentioned that the staff had rented a room across from hers. A minute later, at 6:32 p.m., the subject exited the elevator and entered the lobby. The report noted she was dressed as described in Example 1B. Upon examining Example 1B, it was clear that Claire was wearing a small black cocktail dress paired with high-heeled shoes. She was also adorned with a necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary celebration. However, what stood out the most was the absence of wedding rings on her left hand. The photo clearly showed she wasn't wearing them. The photo, identified as Exhibit 1D, displays Claire and a man in a tight embrace, engaged in a passionate kiss while seated in a booth. The intensity of their connection was clearly visible in the picture. At 8:51 p.m., the report noted that both individuals left the restaurant. They then took the elevator and ascended to Claire's floor. Another photo, labeled Exhibit 1E, captures the moment when Claire and the man entered her room, specifically room 414. In this image, Claire appears slightly intoxicated but undeniably pleased with the evening's events. At 11:13 p.m., the man exited Claire's room and left the building. The report included the license plate number of a car registered to Alexander B. Tate, residing at 1424 Azalea Drive in Denton. Notably, Alexander B. Tate was married and had 2 young children. As I delved further into the report's details, it became evident that Claire repeated her actions the following night with another man. The report bore the signature of an investigator from Denton. This revelation filled me with deep anxiety and resentment. It became clear that my wife was leading a promiscuous life while she was away from home. I couldn't come to terms with her actions. It was a betrayal that exceeded my worst expectations. Even the fact that Claire had lost her wedding rings didn't stop her from being careless. After settling the bill with the private detective, I thanked them and left. I made sure to take 2 additional copies of the report, which were recorded on a CD, to keep them safe. Once I got back home, I wasted no time and immediately called my divorce attorney. I asked about the status of the divorce papers, and the attorney confirmed they were ready for filing. Without hesitation, I instructed them to initiate the filing process and specifically requested that the papers be served to her publicly at her workplace the following day. The attorney assured me that this could be done smoothly and asked for her workplace address, which I promptly provided. My intentions were clear. I aimed to humiliate her during the legal proceedings. Handing her the divorce papers at her workplace not only satisfied my desire for revenge, but also served as a form of justice for her actions. That night, there was no love between us. Claire seemed to sense that something was wrong, perhaps suspecting that I had discovered something unsettling. Though she didn't directly voice her concerns, she expressed hope for my quick recovery. Interestingly, she also appeared somewhat reserved, but I chose not to comment on it and simply ignored it. The next morning, I woke up early after a night of little sleep. I immersed myself in work on the computer until I heard the children waking up, and then I went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. After the meal, I said goodbye to Claire. When she left for work, she approached me for a hug and a kiss, but I responded with a half-playful embrace, encouraging her to leave quickly. At that moment, I sensed she might have had an inkling of what awaited her. As I closed the door behind her, tears welled up in her eyes, and she whispered, "I love you." After her departure, profound sadness washed over me, and I felt an urge to release my tears. Yet, I quickly composed myself as the children required my attention, and I needed to prepare them for the school bus. Around 10:45 a.m., the phone rang, disrupting our morning routine, displaying Claire's workplace on the caller ID. I answered the call without uttering a word, and there was a brief pause as the caller realized I wasn't inclined to engage in conversation. In a trembling voice and a whisper, Claire said, "I'm sorry." Shortly after, the line fell silent, and I remained silent as well. Claire didn't return home that night, and I wondered if she continued her deceitful game, seemingly indifferent to her husband. While I recognized my anger was justified, I also considered that I might have been overly harsh on her. The children, disheartened by their mother's absence, wondered where she was. To uplift their spirits, I invited them to have dinner at a McDonald's cafe. By the time we returned home after dinner, the kids were exhausted and went straight to bed. The next morning, Claire called with a request. "Honey, can I come home and pack my things? Can we talk?" Initially, a sense of guilt welled up within me, but it quickly dissipated. I replied calmly, "Why don't you come between 9 and noon?" As I continued, "Then the kids and I won't be here." Regarding our conversation, I made it clear that I'd speak with her one-on-one in my lawyer's office only after she signed, notarized, and returned the divorce documents. "Then I'll listen to whatever you have to say." There was a sob on the line before Claire answered, "Good." Shortly after, the phone fell silent again. She signed the divorce papers, and 6 months later, our marriage officially came to an end. It turned out that she became pregnant during the affair. Unfortunately, when she attempted to conceal it from her last lover, contraception failed, considering it was near the childbearing age. Even if I hadn't found out about her infidelity through the lost rings, the truth would probably have come out eventually. There were rumors that she had started dating again. If she ever gets close to getting married again, I've thought about honestly warning her future spouse about her unfaithfulness. It seems unnecessary for her to deceive and hurt another person. We had a meeting, and during our conversation in my lawyer's office, I shared my thoughts with her. She pleaded with me to reconsider the divorce decision. She talked about how difficult it was for her not to have unrestricted access to our children. However, I explained that I couldn't trust her anymore. Then she mentioned that she had seen a psychologist who diagnosed her with nymphomania. She assured me that her impulses were now under control. Despite her explanations, I told her that it wasn't enough for me. Even if she claimed to have her urges in check, the fact that she hadn't sought help earlier indicated a lack of proactive effort on her part. If she had addressed her cravings from the beginning, she might not have found herself in the current situation. When I left the lawyer's office, she continued to cry. Having recently reconnected with a school friend who keeps me updated, I learned that he works at a nightclub. He mentioned seeing my ex-wife at the club where he works on several weekend nights. She frequents the club with different men and behaves provocatively. I was deeply hurt that my children have such an irresponsible mother. Perhaps my ex-wife never recovered from nymphomania. A friend of Claire's also called me and informed me that Claire was in poor health. She said my ex-wife needed my assistance because she had contracted herpes. Meanwhile, she continued her promiscuous lifestyle. I sympathized with her but conveyed that I couldn't offer any help, nor did I want to. Claire chose this lifestyle and its associated health issues. I began dating again, and it seems I've found someone special. This woman, around my age and divorced herself, discovered her ex-husband's infidelity and didn't tolerate such behavior. She possesses strength and resilience, qualities I genuinely admire. It seems that my children also like her. I believe this is a natural progression, and it's only a matter of time before I consider taking our relationship to a new level.
I'm Andy Gilmore, and at 36, I've been hitched to Claire, my high school girlfriend, for 16 years now. April, our teenage daughter, is 14 years old. I'm a pretty solid guy, 6 feet tall and around 200 pounds. Most of that's muscle, though, comes with the territory when you've been an electrician for nearly 2 decades. Classroom learning wasn't really my thing, but I excel at practical tasks. Once I finished high school, I started training as an electrician. 4 years down the road, I passed the test to become a journeyman. By the time I hit 24, I'd already gotten my master's license. Intelligence isn't lacking in me, but I prefer hands-on work to studying from textbooks. I wanted to start my own business, but Claire preferred the stability of my job at Alpha Electrical Contractors, since we had a young daughter and she stayed home. My job provided a comfortable life. Our house and cars were paid off. We took vacations and never stressed over bills. I thought we were happy. Tom, my best friend since 3rd grade, became a successful businessman after earning a degree from Stanford and an MBA. He makes more money, but is single, and frequently comes over for dinner and often talks about how envious he is of my family, reminding me that while money can buy many things, it can't buy love. I always agreed. I loved Claire, and April was my world. We were close, and I even taught her a bit about electrical work, though I hoped for more for her future. In August, my world collapsed. I returned home from a job and saw Tom's car in the driveway, which wasn't unusual since he often came over for dinner. Normally, when I arrived, my daughter April would greet me at the door, but this time she wasn't there. Curious, I asked Claire where she was, and she mentioned she was at her friend Danielle's house. Both Claire and Tom had odd expressions signaling something was off. When Claire said, "We need to talk," my heart sank. I had just come from a hot outdoor job and needed a shower, so I asked for a moment to clean up. In the shower, I thought about what might be going on. Could Claire be pregnant? We hadn't talked about more kids, but it had been a few weeks since we were intimate, and the timing seemed possible. That could explain her concern, though I would have embraced the idea of another child. But why was Tom involved? Maybe she confided in him first to gauge how I might react. I began to wonder if someone was seriously ill. I had no family left. My father had died in a car crash when I was 11, and my mother passed away 10 years later. Their divorce, caused by my mother's infidelity and my father's inability to cope with it, had shaped much of my childhood. Maybe the issue was with Claire's parents or her sister Liz. I even considered it could be Claire or Tom, but I figured I would have known sooner if that were the case. With nothing else to go on, I went downstairs to face whatever this was. When I joined them in the living room, I didn't pick up on the fact that Claire and Tom were sitting together on the couch while I sat alone on the love seat. Claire started by saying how much she appreciated me, but it quickly turned into a confession. She and Tom had fallen in love, and she wanted a divorce. It felt like a cinder block had hit my chest. I was speechless, struggling to comprehend what she was saying. Claire continued, hoping we could handle things smoothly for April's sake, keeping her life as undisturbed as possible. When I finally found my voice, I asked if she had slept with him. She gave me a wry smile, and her answer was a knife in my back. "Of course I have, Andy." I was still reeling, trying to process everything. We had been together for over 20 years, more than half our lives. I had always believed we were happy, with nothing in our relationship that couldn't be worked out. Now, I was left grasping for answers, wondering where it had all gone wrong. Tom's attempt to interrupt was what finally got my voice back. "Andy, look! No!" I shouted, surprising even myself. "You're never to speak to me again, you backstabbing son of a witch. Let me make this clear, Tom. If you say another word to me, I will kill you, and I'd happily spend the rest of my life in prison for it. Nod if you get that." He nodded. Tom was just a suit, not very strong, and he knew I could break him in half if I wanted to. "There's no need to act like this," Claire jumped in. "Let's try to keep things civil, please, Andy." "It is necessary for me to act this way, and I'm being as civil as I can. I'm the one who's being betrayed and stomped on, so screw you and your ideas about how I should react." I spat at her. "And I'm taking custody of my little girl, not you. Andy, I get that you're upset, but I'm not giving up custody of April," Claire said. "We can figure out a fair visitation schedule so you can spend plenty of time with her, but she's staying with us so her life can be as normal as possible. You work long hours, and I'll still be at home." "Forget that." I was really nailing it with my words. "You don't understand a damn thing. She's my kid too. I haven't spent the last 18 years busting my arse to support my family just to become a part-time dad because the hoe I married decided to trade up for someone with a bigger bank account. I guess that's why none of the other women ever worked out. He apparently had his eyes on you." "This isn't about money, Andy," she shot back. "The truth is we never should have gotten married. I thought I loved you, but we were just kids. I married you because we'd been together so long and everyone expected it. I tried to be a good wife, But as I grew older, I realized there was more for me out there. And I found it with Tom. We didn't mean for this to happen. He was just always around and we clicked. Honestly, we're surprised you never noticed how well we got along. That's when I saw they were holding hands. I noticed, I said. I just had faith in my wife and best friend, even if that faith was clearly misplaced. It never crossed my mind that 2 of the 3 people who meant the most to me would stab me in the back. You've already done enough to me. If you try to fight me on custody, the gloves come off. Got it? Then I guess the gloves are off, Claire replied. I'm sorry you think it has to be this way. It could have been handled a lot easier. Whatever. I'm sorry for making your complete betrayal harder than you want it to be, you witch. You 2 need to get the hell out of here. I'm not leaving the house I worked my arse off to pay for just because you think I'm not good enough anymore. I'm sure Mr. Moneybags can put you up in his bachelor pad. Fine, Claire said. I've already got a lot of stuff at his place anyway. That stung. I'll just grab a few more things and then we'll go. For what it's worth, Andy, I'm sorry. They were already out of earshot when I muttered. Nothing you say means anything, obviously. I sat silently on the couch while they packed in the bedroom for about 30 minutes. Tom left with a suitcase, and Claire followed, pausing briefly before leaving without saying a word. When April got home, I explained what happened, avoiding any harsh words about her mother or Uncle Tom. I believed in my bond with April, and was confident she would choose to stay with me. At 14, she had a significant say in custody decisions, and I trusted her love for me. I hired a lawyer, determined to fight hard, though he warned the laws weren't in my favor. Alimony seemed likely until Claire married Tom, and child support depended on where April chose to live. I felt sure I wouldn't have to pay. At the hearing 3 weeks later, Claire waived alimony, since Tom earned more and they planned to marry. I avoided looking at her during the proceedings. The judge spent an hour with April, who emerged in tears. I thought she felt guilty about choosing me. The judge granted the divorce, finalizing it in 120 days. Claire waived alimony and claims to our savings, which I kept. However, custody was awarded to Claire, allowing April to stay in the same school and environment. I was stunned. April had chosen Claire over me. I had misjudged everything, believing my family truly cared about me. It felt like a repeat of my past, being used and discarded. Now, they had a better option in Tom. The judge's words about equity, child support, and visitation blurred into background noise. I couldn't focus on anything but the betrayal I felt from the only 3 people that mattered to me. My attorney tried to reassure me, but it was just noise. I drifted into the hallway in a daze, vaguely aware of April hugging me and whispering, "Daddy." But I couldn't respond. The betrayal from Claire, Tom, and even April felt complete. I had no one left. Claire approached with a look of pity, promising I'd still see April, insisting this was for the best. Tom wisely stayed away. "I guess you won and I lost," I said. "I'll be out of here by the end of the week." Thinking I meant leaving the house, she replied, "There's no rush, Andy. Take your time. We can stay in the condo as long as we need to. I really hope we can get through this and learn to get along. You still mean a lot to me." I turned to face her, my voice now laced with anger. "Don't give me your crap. If I meant anything to you, this wouldn't have happened. Like I said, I'll be gone by the end of the week. Take your daughter and leave me alone." "She's our daughter, Andy," Claire said. "She'll see you next weekend." I growled. "No, she made her choice. She chose you. Goodbye, Claire." I walked out without looking back.
Claire. Tom listed his condo after the hearing, expecting a quick sale. Most of his things were packed, ready to move into the house Andy and I shared once Andy left. Our goal was to keep April's life stable since Tom's condo was in a different school district. Tom and I hadn't planned for this. We fell in love despite trying to resist. Hurting Andy wasn't the plan, but our feelings were too strong. Our first intimate moment happened when Andy had an overnight job, confirming we were meant to be together. In the following weeks, we met twice more before telling Andy. My feelings for Tom deepened. During those 2 weeks, it was hard to turn down Andy's advances, but I was now loyal to Tom. We knew Andy would be hurt, but we hoped he'd recover. We didn't expect how it all unfolded. Andy only communicated through his lawyer. He was supposed to pick up April at 4 p.m., but by 4:30 there was no sign of him. His phone was disconnected, and I couldn't reach his lawyer. Worried, I took April to the house. When we arrived, the house looked abandoned. Andy's things were gone, but April's room remained untouched. On the counter, I found a cashier's check covering Andy's child support until April's graduation. A knock on the door startled me, and I hoped it was Andy, but it was Mrs. Perrine, our neighbor. She informed me that Andy hadn't been around for days. He had emptied the house onto the lawn and a Salvation Army truck had picked everything up, likely the day after our divorce hearing. When I asked if he had left any forwarding information, she asked April to step outside. Then, with a sense of dread building, I braced myself for bad news. Mrs. Perrine shared the message Andy had left for me. He said, if you asked where he was, to tell you he'd see you in hell. Tears streamed down my face as the reality hit me. Andy was truly gone. He had prepaid his child support, given away everything he couldn't take with him, disconnected his phone and left without a word. I had thought he meant he was just leaving the house, not disappearing from our lives entirely. When he referred to April as your daughter, I assumed it was said in anger, not a final severing of ties. After Mrs. Perrine left, April came back inside and saw my tears. I had no choice but to tell her the truth. Andy had left. She reacted with anger, blaming me for driving him away by being unfaithful and breaking up our family. She collapsed into tears, and I pulled her into my arms, apologizing, though I knew there was no easy way to make things right. We sat on the floor, crying together for what felt like hours but was only about 10 minutes. Eventually, we drove back to Tom's condo in silence. April shut herself in her room, crying again. Tom asked what had happened, and I explained everything. Andy had donated everything, cut off his phone, left the child support check, and told our neighbor that he would see us in hell. I confessed my fear that Andy might do something drastic. Leaning into Tom, I struggled to comprehend the enormity of what had just happened. Tom said, I never would have believed he'd react like this. He's always been the one that could handle the crisis. When we were being stupid and shattering beer bottles outside that school one night and the cops showed up, we all scattered, but there was no way we'd all get away. He calmly put himself in harm's way to let the rest of us escape. We asked him why the next day, and he said there was no other way out of it. They needed to catch someone. Once they did, he figured they'd stop looking for anyone else. And he said he was the most logical choice since he was the one with the record. He gave himself up for us. It was perfectly logical to him. I knew he'd be hurt by this, but was sure he'd understand that it made sense and we'd somehow move on. There's nothing we can do now until he turns up.
Andy, being an electrician meant I could find work anywhere, even while staying off the radar. I had canceled all my credit cards, paid cash for everything, and moved 3 states away before they realized the house was empty. I found a local contractor who paid me in cash, offering a lower rate than I deserved, but I didn't mind since I didn't need much money and just wanted to keep busy. The contractor asked if I was on the run. I explained I wasn't, just avoiding being found. He seemed to understand, mentioning his own ex-wife, which made me smile. I slept in my car using a nearby truck stop to shower and shave. Although I could afford a room, I avoided anything that required my name. They probably weren't searching for me, especially since they had the child support. But I wasn't taking chances. With colder weather approaching, I found a room for rent. The owner, an elderly woman named Miss Ruth, was willing to do things informally. She didn't need the money, but wanted company and help fixing up her mobile home. In exchange for staying off the record and working on repairs, I'd stay there a few nights a week. It seemed like a fair deal, so I agreed.
Claire. The divorce was finalized in mid-January, and April's 15th birthday followed about a week later. She held on to the hope that her father would reach out, but the day passed without any contact. That night, I was devastated to hear her crying into her pillow. I went into the bedroom I now shared with Tom, a space that used to belong to Andy and me. Tom was reading, as usual. I couldn't believe that Andy had completely cut off contact with April, seemingly giving up on her just because she chose to live with us. Tom admitted he was surprised, too, and suggested that we had underestimated how much the situation had hurt him. However, he reminded me that we couldn't let this overshadow our lives together. We needed to move forward and possibly help April process her feelings through counseling. I agreed, realizing that with Andy gone, we would need to support her in coming to terms with his absence.
Andy, I had been living with Miss Ruth for nearly 3 years, sticking to a routine of going to work and coming home. Most nights I stayed in with her, having no interest in going out or meeting women. It was January, and I had quietly marked my 40th birthday 2 months earlier. Despite trying to forget my past, thoughts of it would creep in. My ex-wife was about to turn 40 as well, and her 3-year anniversary with Tom, whom she married 2 months after our divorce, was coming up. I had seen their wedding announcement online and gotten drunk that day. I also knew my former daughter was turning 18 this month and would graduate high school in June. Brief thoughts about her college plans surfaced, but I quickly pushed them away. All I wanted was a drink to block out memories of those who had betrayed me.
Claire. April had been driving since she was 16, so when she turned 18 and saw the new car we had given her in the driveway, we felt good about letting her take some friends to the mall for the day. We had come to terms with the fact that we no longer expected anything from her father on her birthday, but we still held on to a glimmer of hope. Yet once again the day went by without anything showing up. April. Graduation day. As I sat among the 347 students in my high school class, I shed a few quiet tears for what my life could have been. My parents should still be married, sitting together to watch me walk across the stage, something we had talked about for years. It felt selfish, but I couldn't help how I felt. Mom seemed happy now, having moved on with Tom, and they clearly loved each other, probably more than she ever loved Dad. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that none of this should have happened. I scanned the crowd and spotted Mom and Tom, who waved when our eyes met. Not far from them, I saw Danielle's parents, who had supported me through the divorce and afterward. They had always tried to help me understand the pain Dad likely felt, even though they didn't approve of his choices. I appreciated their presence, even if they were really there for Danielle. As I looked around at other familiar faces, one suddenly stood out. Near the back, a man with long hair and glasses caught my eye. I stood up to get a better look, but just like that, he was gone. Maybe it had only been my imagination. Claire. The next 4 years passed quickly, and without any major events. Despite our attempts, including visits to fertility specialists, Tom and I couldn't conceive a child. I would have loved to give Tom a child, but it wasn't meant to be. Still, we were happy together, even though we regretted some of the fallout from our choices. April was preparing to graduate from UC Berkeley, aiming for a teaching career. She had started dating a young man named Benjamin, and they seemed to be a great match. As often happened during significant moments in April's life, my thoughts drifted to Andy. It had been 7 years since we'd heard anything from him. We had once contacted his attorney, but were told there were no messages from Andy, and even if the lawyer knew where he was, he couldn't tell us. I found some comfort in knowing we hadn't been informed of his death, assuming he was still alive somewhere. I often wondered what his life had become, and if he had managed to move past the hurt I caused him.
Andy. Still living off the grid, I rented a room at a boarding house, paying cash without a lease, thanks to Miss Ruth's reference. At 44, I stayed in good shape. Miss Ruth had fallen ill, her family moved her to a care facility, and her mobile home was sold. I kept working for the same company, still paid in cash, with occasional raises. I wasn't exactly happy, but I had found peace. That changed when I walked into Denny's for lunch. I hadn't been there in a few weeks. Gail, a woman in her early 60s, had become someone I confided in. When I arrived, she directed me to a booth instead of the counter. It became clear why when my server appeared. Someone new, mid-30s, tall, slim, blonde, and beautiful. Her name tag read Sheila. We exchanged glances throughout my meal, and there was a clear connection between us. When her shift ended, Sheila wished me a good day, something she hadn't done with other customers. Taking it as a sign, I asked her to dinner. She smiled and agreed. After she left, I asked Gail for details. Sheila, 35, had an 8-year-old daughter named Megan. Her husband had left her for her best friend, and she'd moved here for a fresh start. Gail had set things in motion, thinking we'd be a great match. I arrived at Denny's early with flowers, nervous but excited. Sheila appeared promptly at 6 o'clock, looking stunning in a white floral dress and pink heels. We complimented each other, and the connection was undeniable. Walking to Maggie's Steakhouse arm in arm felt natural. Seated at a cozy booth, Sheila shared that she had just started at Denny's and appreciated the schedule, which allowed her to be there for her 8-year-old daughter, Megan. When she asked if I had kids, I said no, distancing myself from April. Sheila explained that any man in her life would need to be ready to eventually take on a father role for Megan. I reassured her I liked kids, though thoughts of April briefly surfaced. I admitted to being divorced, keeping the details minimal. After dinner, Sheila asked to be dropped back at the restaurant. She wasn't ready for Megan to see her with someone new until she was certain about our relationship. I respected her decision and reassured her we could take things at her pace. Sheila couldn't go out the next night, but she invited me for breakfast, which I gladly accepted. 2 nights later, I took her to a country western bar where we danced. She turned down offers from others, focusing solely on me, which was a refreshing change from my past with Claire. Our connection deepened, leading to a passionate kiss, and we headed back to my place. Back at the boarding house, we became intimate, sharing a meaningful night together. Afterward, I insisted on driving her home for safety. We shared a lingering kiss before parting. For dinner, I brought a green teddy bear for Megan, who eagerly accepted it. She showed me her stuffed animal collection, and Sheila and I shared a quick kiss. Megan's lively energy filled the evening, reminding me of April at her age, stirring up some old emotions that I quickly suppressed. After dinner, Sheila and I sat on the couch, holding hands and talking, while watching Megan play with her stuffed animals, including her new friend Bobby, the green teddy bear. It was a simple yet heartwarming evening. Rather abruptly, Megan stopped and looked at me. "Are you going to be my new daddy?" I gently explained to Megan that while her mom and I were still getting to know each other, marriage was far off. I reassured her that we'd spend lots of time together as a family, but there would also be moments when it was just me and Sheila. Megan seemed satisfied and focused on her ice cream. As we ate, old painful memories resurfaced, and I fought back tears, which Sheila noticed but didn't address. Later, I read Megan a bedtime story, feeling honored by the request. On the couch, Sheila praised how I handled Megan's questions. She invited me to stay the night with the understanding that I'd leave before Megan woke up. I agreed, and we spent a deeply intimate night together. Despite my lingering fears, being with Sheila felt like a second chance at love. Afterward, she checked on Megan, who was fast asleep with her new teddy bear. I dressed quietly and left, grateful for how things were unfolding and hopeful for the future.
Sheila. I was relaxing in Andy's bed while Megan was at a sleepover, and I had the day off. Andy had gone to work after we spent the night together, making love most of the night and again in the morning. We've been together for 8 months now, and I'm completely in love. I'm pretty sure he feels the same, and I expect him to propose any day now. After rolling out of bed and showering, I started to look around Andy's room. We usually stayed at my place because of Megan, so I wasn't here often, and this was one of the few times I'd been here alone. His room was simple: small desk, filing cabinet, microwave, hot plate, and a queen-size bed. As I glanced around, I noticed a file box tucked into the corner of his closet. It piqued my curiosity, especially since it was from the period of his life before he moved to Texas, which he never talked about. Torn between respecting his privacy and wanting to know more about the man I planned to marry, I decided to take a quick look. Inside, I found his marriage certificate and divorce decree, which didn't surprise me, but then I saw he had a daughter named April, now around 22, which would have made her just 14 when they divorced. I was stunned, as Andy had told me he didn't have any kids. The rest of the paperwork seemed normal, but this revelation about his daughter left me with more questions. There was even a phone number for his ex-wife, Claire. I carefully put everything back, unsure what to do next. Maybe Gail, who had known Andy for years, could give me some answers. I decided I'd start by talking to her. The next morning, I got to work early to talk to Gail. I asked her what she knew about Andy's past before he moved here, hoping for some insight. Gail reacted with concern, warning me to leave it alone and trust that Andy was a good man who would take care of me. Despite her advice, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed answers, especially after discovering that Andy had a daughter he had never mentioned. Throughout the day, I kept thinking about it. When Andy came in for breakfast, I did my best to act normal, but my mind was racing. After my shift ended, I returned to my apartment to think things through. The more I considered it, the more I realized that I needed to understand why Andy had left his daughter behind, especially since I had a daughter of my own, Megan. She adored Andy, and he treated her like his own. But if he could abandon one child, could he do it again? I couldn't risk Megan's heart without knowing the full story. As her mother, her well-being came first, even before my own happiness. Since neither Gail nor Andy would give me any answers, I knew I had only one option left to find out the truth. Claire. The phone showed a private number, and though I had grown accustomed to receiving junk calls, I still answered in the slim hope it might be Andy. When the voice on the other end asked for Claire Gilmore, my old married name, I nearly hung up, assuming it was another sales call. But the uncertainty in the voice made me pause. The caller introduced herself as Sheila and told me she was dating my ex-husband, Andy. Shocked, I stood frozen, unable to process the unexpected news. For years, I had thought about what I would say if someone ever contacted me about him. But now that it was happening, I couldn't find the right words. After a brief moment to collect myself, I continued the conversation. Sheila confirmed that she was dating Andy and understood my surprise, acknowledging that I hadn't heard from him in 8 years. She said Andy was doing well but wouldn't tell me where he was, sensing he wouldn't want her to share that information. She confessed to doing some snooping, as Andy had never opened up to her about his past. It stung a bit to hear that he had made a new life, even finding a girlfriend, yet he still wouldn't acknowledge our past together. Of course, I understand. I'm glad to hear he's doing well. He's a good man, Sheila. He didn't deserve what I did to him. If you don't mind me asking, Claire, what exactly did you do to him? I'm not really surprised he didn't tell you. To put it briefly, we were together for over 20 years and married for 16, and I divorced him to marry his best friend, who he had known since 3rd grade. Wow, it sounds terrible when I say it like that. Wow. My husband did the same thing to me. He divorced me for my best friend. Small world, isn't it? We hadn't been together as long, though, but that doesn't explain why he left the way he did. People get divorced all the time, even for reasons like yours. But they don't just up and leave their kids. There's got to be more to it. There is. I went on to explain what led to Andy's departure. I don't think he viewed it as abandoning his daughter because in his eyes, she had already left him first by choosing to live with me and Tom. Actually, right after the divorce hearing, he referred to her as your daughter and mentioned he'd be gone in a week, but I didn't grasp what he meant at the time. I can't say I agree with his actions, but I can understand them a bit better now, said Sheila. I didn't want to stir things up, but I felt this might be my only chance to discuss it. Sheila, I know you don't owe me anything, and this isn't for me, I said. April is getting married soon. She's tried to move on and cope with the fact that her father hasn't reached out since she was 14, not even a birthday card. Now, with her wedding approaching, she's constantly upset that her dad won't be there to walk her down the aisle, a moment she's imagined since she was a little girl. If you have any influence over him, if you can do anything. Sheila remained calm, didn't freak out, or hang up. She thoughtfully considered my request and responded sensibly, despite being the one currently in his life and the one who had something to lose. I understand what you're asking, Claire. If I bring this up, he might leave me and just disappear again. He can get a job anywhere and he's not short on money. I wouldn't even know how to start this conversation, much less convince him to come. Of course, I get it. Maybe it's better to let things be. Sheila, thank you so much for this call. Please keep my number. I would really appreciate it if you could update me occasionally on how he's doing. It would be comforting to know that he's moved on with his life. I'll keep your number, Sheila replied. But I can't promise more than that. I hope you understand. I immediately phoned Tom at work to share what had happened. Did you manage to get her contact details or anything we can use? No, her number was blocked and she didn't share her last name. But maybe this is just a small step towards something bigger. Sheila. I ended the call feeling both relieved and uncertain. I had learned what I needed, but now I had to decide what to do with it. Claire was right. I didn't owe them anything. Why should I risk my relationship with Andy for them? But it wasn't about them. It was about me and Megan. If I were in Claire and April's place, I'd want someone to help, at least for my daughter's sake. I couldn't shake the fear that Andy might abandon Megan, just like he had left April. I needed to know if his past actions were circumstantial or part of his nature. I made a tough decision, knowing it could risk everything. Andy needed to confront his past and face April. If I were to trust him with Megan's heart, He had to address what he had done, not keep it buried. The next day, I called Claire again. She was surprised but agreed to help. I asked for April's number and her promise to keep Andy's location a secret. She understood and gave me the number after preparing April for my call. After waiting, I nervously dialed April's number, ready to speak to Andy's daughter for the first time, knowing it wouldn't be an easy conversation. "Good afternoon. This is April Gilmore. Is this Sheila?" "Yes, it is," I replied. "Your mother must have explained what's going on." "She did, and she made it clear that anything you tell me about my father should be kept from her. I'm sorry it has to be like this, but I understand. I'm ready to do whatever you need. You'll need to fly into Austin International Airport as soon as you can. I'll pick you up and take you to your dad. You can stay with me while you're here, and we'll just see what unfolds." "Can I ask you something?" April inquired. "Why are you risking your relationship for me? You don't even know me." "That's a valid question, April," Sheila said. "I was in your shoes once, and my daughter is in your position now, just a girl wanting her father in her life. Some things are too important to ignore. I need to know the man I plan to marry, and I want him to make things right with you." While we spoke, April went online and booked a flight to Austin for the next day. She emailed me the itinerary, and I'd pick her up myself. Now, all that was left to do was wait.
Andy. When I got home from work, exhausted, I was pleasantly surprised to find Sheila waiting for me, completely without clothes. I pulled her into my arms and kissed her deeply, forgetting everything else in that moment. We spent an incredible night together, including a new level of intimacy when she gave me her a-hole for the first time. I briefly wondered what prompted the occasion, but decided not to question it. My love for Sheila was overwhelming, stronger than anything I'd felt before, even with Claire. It made me understand in some way why Claire made her decision, though it didn't lessen the pain or betrayal. As I dropped Sheila back at her apartment, I had the engagement ring in my pocket, almost ready to propose. But I wanted the moment to be perfect, so I held off. When she closed the door, her expression seemed slightly bittersweet, and I hoped everything was all right.
Sheila. After dropping Megan off at school, I drove to the airport to meet April. At baggage claim, I held a sign with her name and scanned the crowd. Despite the many people, I recognized her immediately when she smiled and walked toward me. We exchanged pleasantries, and she mentioned how eager she was to see her father after 8 years. We drove back to Marble Falls, the small town where Andy and I lived. Before reaching town, I pulled over and called Rosie, Andy's dispatcher, to find out where he was working. She told me he was at the Beals on 4th and Main and joked about a past encounter in the back of Andy's truck, which made me blush. April caught on, teasing me lightly. As we neared the department store, I spotted Andy's truck. I instructed April to wait a few feet back while I positioned myself near the driver's door. After about 20 minutes, we heard Andy's voice, signaling that the moment they had both waited for was about to happen.
Andy. After fixing the electrical issue in the restroom, I headed out to finish the last 2 calls before returning to Sheila and Megan. I had been carrying the ring with me, waiting for the right moment to propose, though I knew I might have to create that opportunity soon. As I walked toward my truck, I saw Sheila's car parked behind it and spotted her standing near the door. I reached for the ring box in my pocket, thinking this might be the moment. But then I noticed someone else, April. Seeing her instantly brought back a flood of emotions, the pain of betrayal, fear of what her sudden appearance might mean, and anger toward Sheila for orchestrating this meeting. I greeted April with a flat tone, acknowledging her presence, then turned to Sheila, realizing she must have found out about my past, and facilitated this. Trying to avoid the emotions rising inside me, I quickly mentioned that I still had work to do, put my tools in the truck, and prepared to move on with my day. "Daddy, I'm getting married." "Is that right?" I answered. "Congratulations." I paused, unable to squelch the anger that was burning inside me. Try not to become a cheating hoe like your mother. With that, I climbed into the truck and shut the door. It didn't end there, as April was now at my window, banging on it with both fists. "I saw you! I know you still love me and care about me because I saw you!" She was yelling to be heard through the glass, which I then rolled down. "What are you talking about, April? My high school graduation. You were in the back and you were trying not to be noticed. But it was you. That's how I know you still love me. I don't know what it is you think you saw, April, but it sure as hell wasn't me." I fired up the truck and pulled away. Damn it. I knew I should have gotten rid of that stuff, but I was trying to be cautious and hold on to a few things just in case. Now, my old life has come back to haunt me and tear me apart. Clearly, once wasn't enough. I drove for about 10 minutes before pulling over to gather my thoughts. How could Sheila do this to me? I was happy, damn it. After all these years, I finally found love and was content. I should have realized it wouldn't last. Happiness clearly wasn't meant for me, and I won't make that mistake again. I've yet to have anyone enter my life without eventually betraying me. Why would this time be any different? Finally, I pulled back onto the road, heading to my next job. I'd finish my calls today, then call my boss to let him know my past had finally caught up with me, and I'd be moving on. He'd understand.
Sheila. April was crying on my shoulder. I was completely stunned by how cold Andy had been. This was his own child, for God's sake. What she did wasn't that terrible. Kids make choices like this all the time, so this was clearly more about him and the pain he was feeling. Andy had always been nothing but loving to Megan and me. This behavior seemed so out of character for him. I helped April into the car and drove to my apartment. You'll stay with me for now. This was just the first attempt. I'll talk to him again when he gets off work. I was trying to reassure her, even though I wasn't entirely sure myself.
Andy. When I returned to the boarding house after 6:30 p.m., I expected to find Sheila and April waiting for me, but they weren't there. It was a relief in a way, making my decision to leave easier. I loved Sheila and Megan deeply, but after what she had done, bringing April back into my life, I felt betrayed. Now that my past had resurfaced, I couldn't trust Sheila anymore. I began packing, knowing I would leave behind everything I had at Sheila's. Ignoring the knock on the door, I continued. But when the door opened, I knew it had to be Sheila. She leaned against the wall, watching silently before confronting me about leaving again. She admitted to speaking with Claire, finding out everything from the past. She said the same thing happened to her, but he left it alone and lived his life. I lashed out, pointing out how our situations weren't the same. Her betrayal wasn't like mine, not after 20 years of marriage, and a daughter choosing to side with those who destroyed me. Frustrated, I let years of buried pain surface, recalling how my mother cheated on my father and then abandoned me. My father took his life, and I was left to endure abuse from my stepfather. The scars on my back were a constant reminder of a childhood filled with neglect and violence. As I walked around the room, I kept thinking, why did Sheila have to dig this up? I was finally happy again. I had her and Megan, and I had worked so hard to leave the past behind. Those people were nothing to me anymore, just shadows of a life I didn't want. I'd been looking forward to the future, and now Sheila had opened up this can of worms again. Why couldn't she just let things be? She had nothing to do with them, and neither did Megan. Weren't we happy? Sheila tried to explain that she had found out about April and felt she needed to understand why I left her behind. I could see it now. She was afraid that if I could walk away from my own daughter, then I could walk out on Megan too. It was obvious in the way she looked at me, and it hit me hard. I felt betrayed again, this time by the one person I thought I could count on now. The realization pissed me off even more. I told Sheila that if she didn't trust me, I would save her the trouble of worrying about it. I'd be gone by morning. I was done with ruining lives. I told her to join the club of people who'd hurt me, and that once I was gone, she could cozy up to my daughter and the rest of the backstabbers. Maybe they'd come up with some new ways to get to me. But I wouldn't be around for them to mess with anymore. I thought I'd made my point, but all I really did was piss her off. And as I stood there, staring at her, I realized I might have just pushed away the one good thing I had left.
Sheila. I had reached my limit with Andy's self-pity and bitterness. I loved him deeply, but I couldn't stand by while he destroyed everything we had. He acted like the world was out to get him, but the reality was different. His daughter had dropped everything to come see him because she loved him and wanted him in her life. She wanted him to walk her down the aisle and meet his future grandchildren. Even his ex-wife, who he believed hated him, was simply trying to help their daughter find closure. If Andy wanted to stay trapped in his anger and bitterness, that was his choice. But I wasn't going to stay with someone who couldn't move forward. I admitted that yes, I worried he might walk out on me and Megan, especially after finding out he had done it before, but I was ready to understand, and I could have, if only he had trusted me enough to talk about it. Relationships are built on trust, and I had shared everything about myself with him, even the things I wasn't proud of. I did it because I believed in us, and I wanted him to take care of me, not out of need, but out of love. I threw his key at him in frustration, hitting him square in the chest. He didn't even flinch, which only fueled my anger. I told him he could leave, go back to just existing like he had for 7 years, instead of living like he had with me and Megan for the past 8 months. If that's what he wanted, fine. But I wanted something more, and I had hoped to find it with him. Without looking back, I stormed out, slamming the door behind me, making the whole building shake. As much as I wanted him to chase after me, to beg me to stay, I meant every word. I couldn't live with someone who refused to let go of the past and embrace the love we had right in front of us.
Andy. As Sheila slammed the door behind her, it hit me that I had been wrong. In trying to protect myself from the pain of betrayal, I had pushed away those I loved. I didn't want to lose Sheila and Megan, and there was also the chance of reconnecting with April, but I knew I had a lot to fix. I stopped packing and rushed to Sheila's place. Seeing her car there, I knew I had to make things right. Kneeling at her door, ready to apologize, she opened it before I could knock. I admitted my mistakes, told her I needed her, and begged for forgiveness, promising to do whatever it took. Sheila forgave me, but on one condition: I had to make things right with April. I agreed, relieved for a second chance. Inside, April sat on the couch, clearly having cried. I knelt in front of her, holding her hands, emotions flooding me. I apologized for letting my anger and hurt cloud my judgment. I explained how I believed her choice to live with her mother was a betrayal, leading me to leave. Thanks to Sheila, I finally saw how wrong I was and asked for her forgiveness. April forgave me, saying she was never angry, just sad. She wished I had talked to her before leaving, but she understood the pain her mother's actions had caused. We hugged, trying to make up for the lost years. Noticing Sheila crying, April invited her into the hug, and we shared an emotional moment together. After asking where Megan was, Sheila brought her in, and I reminded her of my promise about becoming her new dad. She remembered, and I told her to watch closely. Back in the living room, I lifted Sheila to her feet, thanked her for reuniting me with April, and proposed. She said yes, and we shared a kiss, with April and Megan watching. April corrected me when I called them stepsisters, insisting they'd just be sisters. We celebrated with dinner and planned a courthouse wedding. That same night, I started moving into Sheila's apartment. At the wedding, I felt sharp in my tux, but Sheila looked stunning in her pink dress, her pregnancy just starting to show. April looked like a princess, and Benjamin was thrilled to see her walking down the aisle with me. I had managed to avoid Claire and Tom, only glimpsing them briefly during preparations and the rehearsal. Claire had gained a lot of weight, now well over 200 pounds. She once said life with Tom made her fat and happy. Whether she was truly happy, I didn't know. But the weight gain was obvious, and part of me wondered if guilt had played a role. As Sheila and I stood chatting with some of Benjamin's relatives, I didn't notice Claire and Tom approaching from behind. Claire's voice, which once felt heavenly, now grated on my ears. Any fond feelings I had for her had long since faded, though, for April's sake, I tried to remain civil. I saw Tom begin to say something, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Tom, do you remember the last thing I said to you? Nod if you remember." He nodded. My feelings have not changed. Sheila, sensing the tension, joined him as they walked away, leaving me and Claire alone for the first time in years. Once Sheila and Tom had left, Claire and I stood in silence. I could have gone the rest of my life without speaking to her again, but that clearly wasn't an option. She broke the silence, expressing surprise that after all this time, the animosity still lingered. She hoped we could move past it, maybe even be friends, given that we had all seemingly found happiness in our new lives. She acknowledged Sheila and our happiness together, including my role as a father to Megan, something she had learned about recently. I made it clear that her hopes for reconciliation were misplaced. The intense love I once had for her had turned into a deep hatred for both her and Tom. When she asked why I couldn't let it go, I explained, starting with the painful truth of my past. My mother had repeatedly cheated on my father before leaving him for another man. My father, devastated, took his own life, something I had hidden out of embarrassment. This background, however, wasn't the core issue. The real pain came from the betrayal of the three people I loved most: Claire, April, and Tom. I had built my life around them, believing we would grow old together, but their actions shattered those dreams. Claire admitted that she had loved me, but not in the way I had loved her, something she couldn't control. But for me, the betrayal wasn't just about the loss of a romantic connection. It was about the destruction of trust and the sense of betrayal that two of the people I relied on the most had conspired together to rip apart everything I thought I knew. "Andy, we didn't mean for it to happen," she said. "You didn't stop it either. You just went after what you wanted, ignoring the consequences. Do you even understand how hard it was for me to think about trusting another woman after what you did? Losing you and Tom wasn't enough. You took April too. April made that choice on her own? Bullshit. Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't influence her to stay with you. I know what you said. It'll be strange with Tom here instead of Daddy, but at least I'll still be here after school and you can see your dad whenever possible." Tell me that didn't happen. Claire couldn't deny it, and I knew she wouldn't. You wanted it all, didn't you? Your selfishness destroyed someone who loved and supported you for 16 years? Did you ever think how that would affect me? Did you ever suggest to April that maybe she should live with me so I wouldn't be left completely alone? You're right, Andy. I didn't think of it like that, but you disappeared without saying a word. What did you expect me to do? My whole family was gone. I was left alone while my wife and daughter lived with the man who replaced me. Did you think I could stay there and watch my life move on without me, only to see my daughter a few days a month? I had two choices: cut all ties or end my life. And honestly, I was close to choosing the latter. When I told Mrs. Perrine I'd see you in hell, I meant it. I even had the gun. Claire, shocked, said, "God, Andy, I had no idea." Of course you didn't. You were too busy with your new life to care. You replaced me, convinced April to stay with you, and never once checked on me. After the hearing, I told you I'd be gone in a week. I didn't mean just out of the house, I meant dead. You didn't even ask what I meant. I didn't end myself because I hated you and Tom too much to give you the satisfaction. Andy, I cut her off, saying, "I let my anger cloud my judgment with April. When she chose to live with you, I assumed she had picked your side and wanted Tom as her father, and I overreacted by leaving without a word. That cost me 8 years I can never get back. Thankfully, Sheila pulled me out of that spiral, or who knows how much more I would have lost. Now I know what it's like to have someone who actually cares about me. Do you understand why I still hate you?" "I get it, Andy," she admitted. "I hoped time would heal things, but it hasn't. I'm sorry for how we handled it. Can we at least be civil? Yes, we share a daughter. I'll treat you like any stranger. But make sure Tom never speaks to me again, or you'll be a widow." Over the next 2 years, I gradually bought out my boss as he retired, becoming the largest electrical contractor in Marble Falls and one of the biggest in Central Texas. While I still went on calls occasionally, I mostly ran the business from the office with my wife Sheila and 10-year-old daughter Megan on staff. Sheila managed appointments, I handled staff and projects, and we did the paperwork together. Megan adored her new baby sister, Katie. A year after our wedding, Benjamin got a promotion to Dallas, about 4 hours away, but we still see them monthly. They're expecting my first grandchild next year. Nothing terrible happened to Tom and Claire, aside from their significant weight gain. While I don't care to hear about them, April keeps Sheila updated, and Sheila occasionally shares. Sheila doesn't hold a grudge like I do. She even sends them a thank you card on our anniversary, saying their actions brought us together.